morning. It is 9 o'clock, the appointed hour. We have a quorum present. And therefore, I'm going to go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Douglas County Board of Commissioners. This meeting will be conducted in compliance with Nebraska's open meeting laws, a copy of which is on the back wall. Could we please start with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah, we also have an automatic defibrillator in the back. We will convene first as the Board of Equalization. Mr. Clerk, could we please have the roll?
Commissioner Borgeson? Here. Commissioner Boyle? Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh is absent. Commissioner Kraft?
Here.
Commissioner Morgan? Here. Commissioner Rogers? Mr. Chair.
Present. I would mention today is the last day that we're allowed to do meetings telephonically. It is nice to have Commissioner Kraft with us here by Zoom. We will probably be continuing the Zoom portion of our meetings through the end of the year, I would guess, until the pandemic is over and people are a little more free to move around, although Commissioner Kraft will no longer be able to vote telephonically after today. First item for consideration, approval of the minutes from last week's meeting, and item B, call for 2 weeks from today as the date for hearing on certified assessments corrections. Motion by Commissioner Boyle, second by Commissioner Morgan for items A and B. Questions or comments?
I'm trying to look at the agenda here, but items A and B include A being the federal government and local government establish this agreement with the United States Marshal Service.
No, I'm sorry, we're on the Board of Equalization, and no, those are not the items.
Thank you, that helps.
Okay. All right, further questions or comments? Then could we please vote?
I vote yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Citizen comments. Would anybody like to address the Board of Equalization on anything that is not on the agenda? This is your opportunity to do so. If not, we have resolutions.
Mr. Chair, if I may real quick, Dan Esch, Douglas County Clerk, just wanted to remind anybody who's watching that today, June 30th, is the final day to file a real property valuation protest with Douglas County.
Thank you. Yes, today, June 30th, is the deadline for that. They can still file up to the end of business today, right?
Yes, so if you're dropping it off in person, you have until 6 p.m. We're opening an extra hour and a half tonight. If you're mailing it, that just has to be postmarked by today, and if you're filing online, as long as we get it before midnight.
Very good. Thank you, Dan. Commissioner Boyle.
Yes, there we go. My question is, I had a couple of calls from taxpayers who said that their appointments were canceled, and also there's some question about whether or not there's going to be in-person protests available, or is it all by phone?
There's no question. The governor has never allowed us to back down from that, so we have to offer in-person.
Are we doing that?
We're trying. We're having a hard time getting the referees, and I know on at least one day they had a referee that didn't show up, and every appointment that came in that day had to be turned away. We are having issues keeping adequately staffed with the referees, but we have no choice. We are encouraging everybody as much as we can to appeal by telephone or online, because the in-person is a hassle, but we have to offer it, and we are offering it.
Okay, that's great. I just didn't know, is there anything we can do to improve the service? I suppose it's to encourage people to do those protests by phone, but what about the materials they want to present and so forth? Do they have to mail those in? It gets pretty clumsy. I don't know, that's just...
Mr. Esch, would you?
Dan Esch, County Clerk. If someone is not coming in person, even if they are coming in person, if they can mail or email or drop us off the materials ahead of time, we provide it to the referee. And, you know, we provide copies for folks too. If they didn't keep a copy for themselves, we make sure they have a copy of what they provided.
Okay, well, what I'm running up against, one of the callers was in her 70s, and she doesn't do computers, and she must be related to me. But anyway, so she doesn't do computers, and I am real concerned. I really would like to know of people who try to appeal and the mechanics get in the way. If we have someone who's trying to appeal and can't get this sent in and can't do that and all this sort of thing, I want to figure out a way to know who that is and if we can accommodate them some way even after the deadline. I mean, as long as they get their stuff in on time, but they don't have all these ancillary arguments about their neighbor's property and all that, I'd like to be sure we take care of them. Can we do that? Can we talk to Catherine about that, or whoever?
Go ahead and turn
Dan?
the video on.
Make a comment? Commissioner Boyle, I hear what you're saying, and I know you and I talked about that. In my own case, I had a approximately 50% increase, and I had an appointment for a couple of weeks, and then about the afternoon before, they said there was no way to meet. And I know that some of the referees are vulnerable and have some illnesses, so it's a little difficult. Catherine Hall helped me, and I was able to do it by phone. And the gentleman that I talked to, was very helpful, had all the information, and did a good job. So I think people can do it by phone. It's not maybe exactly the way you'd like, but I think your idea to try to do as many as we can, but I know that some of them do have some serious illnesses, the referees, and that's what's made it a real challenge, even though they've got the plexiglass and so on. But anything I can do to help you, and if you say, hey, you want to talk to the referees together or something, or Catherine, and Catherine's been great about trying to help people. I don't know if she's on the phone or not.
She's trying to call in. She's having some technical difficulties.
Well, I guess what I would say to kind of bring this to an end, I think what Commissioner Morgan said makes a great deal of sense. Get the protest on file by the end of business today. Send in everything you can to support your position. Do that by mail, would you say? And then if it collapses, if you can't come in person, you've got all your material in and you can do it by phone. Does that sound about right to everybody? Okay, well, let's just urge taxpayers to do that, and then at least it'll be on file, and then whatever way it goes, if it's a referee, fine. If it's not, then it's telephone. Good deal. Okay, that's the advice I gave, and I'm
And
glad it was
Commissioner
right.
Boyle, it's my understanding, and we've had some of the people after they met with the referee come before the Board of Equalization, and we have taken some action a few years ago. So I think we're here to listen in case there's someone, especially on commercial properties or that kind of thing.
Great, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Next on the agenda is resolutions D through F. I'm not aware of any need for executive session for Board of Equalization.
Motion to approve?
And adjourn.
Adjourn, yes.
Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Rogers. Questions or comments? Could we please vote?
I vote yes.
And Commissioner Kavanaugh has joined us. The motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Mr. Kavanaugh, you mean Commissioner? You mean Mark?
No.
Well, earlier it was motion passed 6-0 and Commissioner Kavanaugh wasn't here.
I'm sorry.
so.
Misunderstood.
Okay, could you please call the roll for the Board of Commissioners?
Commissioner Borgeson? Here. Commissioner Boyle?
Here.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Here.
Commissioner Kraft?
Here.
Commissioner Morgan? Here. Commissioner Rogers? Here. Mr. Chair?
Present. Thank you. Item 1A, approval of minutes from last week's meeting. Item B, claims for payment through July 7th.
Second?
Should that be July 7th or July 14th, since we don't meet on the 7th?
Douglas County Clerk Dan Esch, we usually approve them through the day of the board meeting.
But we don't meet on the 7th.
Well, I know, but so normally today, if we were meeting on the 7th, it would say June 30th. So.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Did we have a motion?
I got a motion from Commissioner Morgan
I second it.
And second by Commissioner Boyle.
Okay, questions or comments to items 1A or B? Then could we please vote?
Excuse me
I
for
vote
interrupting
yes.
again. Is that, oh, sorry, this is just a public question. When you say B now, is that the contract to which I referred earlier?
No.
This is approval of claims submitted for payment through Tuesday, July 7th.
Thank you
It's-
so much for your understanding. I'm trying to follow the agenda. Thank you.
Okay. Could we please vote?
I vote yes.
Motion passes 7-0, and to the caller or person asking questions, that item is actually coming up next.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next is the consent agenda, where we find items A through J. Motion by Commissioner Rogers, second by Commissioner Borgeson. Now, questions or comments or anything anybody would like pulled out? Commissioner Boyle.
I'd like A pulled out and also B, A and B.
All right. Is that okay with the motioner and the second? Okay. Then the motion before us is consent agenda less items A and B. Questions or comments to any of those items?
One moment, please.
Hello. Yeah, we have a couple questions about item B. If
We will come to
there's-
item B in just a minute.
Perfect.
It
Okay.
is not a part of this motion.
Mr. Chairman, just an informational question before we do this on one of the items. Should we do that now or after?
On one of the items in the motion,
A or B.
I just have an informational question so that the public's aware.
okay, if it's on something that's in the motion, this
Yeah,
would be
it's
the appropriate
on
time.
two items, H and I, actually. And this is just, like I said, informational, and I don't know if anyone from the sheriff's office is here, or perhaps one of our staff can speak to this. These are two items for the Douglas County Sheriff requesting approval of service agreements, and one with the city of Blair and a service agreement with Washington County Attorney's Office.
It's H and I. H and I.
H and I, yeah. And I don't know if anyone can give us a brief explanation of those for the public. That's what I'm asking.
Or doesn't it?
Well-
Commissioner Boyle?
Mr. Kavanaugh, I read those pretty clearly, and I'm sure you did too, and it looks to me like it's, one is a crime lab, and the second is kind of something that maybe they do it before, they've done it before, but it seems kind of like what they're doing is advising the county attorney on some matters, and I was puzzled by it, but I didn't take time to call the sheriff to ask. But it is a little bit, I don't know if we've ever done that before.
Is there anybody from our staff who's familiar with these that could give us a brief explanation? County attorney?
Could someone call the sheriff's office and ask them to zoom in, do you suppose?
I think Teresa's gonna get up and speak to it.
Teresa, York County Attorney's Office. So both of those are pretty routine. The Sheriff's Office does contracts with other jurisdictions to do their forensic lab work. And I will direct you first to H. That one is with the city of...
I don't know if your mic's on. I'm having difficulty hearing you.
The first one, letter H, is with the city of Blair. And if you note the resolution, it says that it's,
Excuse
for...
me, counsel.
Yes.
I can't hear you.
Try using the other microphone.
They both appear to be working. But is that better, Commissioner? Can you hear me now?
It doesn't appear that your mic is on. I think the red light goes on.
The mic is on.
We
Okay,
can
go
hear.
ahead.
I couldn't
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
I can.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So the first one, letter H, is an agreement with the city of Blair. It relates to, and I note in the resolution, CSI and forensic lab services. The sheriff's office has a number of contracts with other jurisdictions who don't have the ability to maintain a crime lab. And then looking at letter I believe this is also a similar agreement. It's simply with the Washington County Attorney's Office, again, but it's for CSI and for crime lab services.
Thank you. Have we had these in the past, are these renewals of existing agreements?
I can't say for certain. I think these are new, but it's an agreement that we've done with many other jurisdictions, and this agreement is modeled after those. So it's something that the board has seen many times before.
And just fiscally, they pay for services.
They
is that
do.
correct?
They do.
Thank you.
Any further questions to anything within items C through J of the consent agenda? If not, I would ask for the vote.
I vote yes.
Come on.
I'd like to speak on A.
Commissioner, motion passes 6-0. Commissioner Morgan is absent.
Thank you. This brings us back then to item A, establishing an agreement that allows the U.S. Marshal Service or other authorized agency user to house federal detainees with the local government at the Douglas County Youth Center. This has been laid over from 2 previous meetings. What is the pleasure of the board? Motion by Commissioner Borgeson, seconded by Commissioner Rogers. Questions? Commissioner Boyle, did you have a question on item A?
You know, I did, and I objected to this because it looked to me like there, we've got minors that would be subject to being talked to and so forth by U.S. Marshals. It's not quite the same. I mean, they're not. It's not ICE. It's not. While there might be young people held there, which there are not now, young people held there for immigration, apparent immigration violations. It looks to me like, well, first of all, we've done this for many years, and I guess none of us, including myself, have really spotted this way. But when we asked our staff to contact the U.S. Marshals and talk to them about this contract, I didn't really like their answer. They just said, we're not going to change it. They refused, so they wouldn't budge. So here is the dilemma we find ourselves in, at least I think we do. These are young people. There are none being held there now. And we don't usually hold very many, a couple, 2 or 3, something like that. But they are from this area, which is a positive. It allows their parents or relatives to come see them while they're at our youth center, which is a real plus. They're allowed telephone use and so forth, those sorts of things. They're allowed the kind of limited freedom that young people have inside that facility. And so it's a good thing to have them here instead of in Des Moines or instead of Kansas City or someplace else, because they will be incarcerated, and they'll be incarcerated under this contract wherever they go. So on balance, which we have to do in life all the time, is try to figure out what's the best. And I'm afraid to say this is about as good as it gets, because otherwise this same contract will apply to these young people in Kansas City, and they won't have the home advantage of being here with somebody coming to see them and so forth. So I would reluctantly say that we really don't have any choice, because if we turn this down, these children will be sent to other cities and held under this contract in other cities. So we're losing the personal touch and having them be able to talk to people, family and friends and so forth in their hometown, or at least in this area. So I'd have to reluctantly remove my objection to it. I think it's about as good as it gets, because these young people are going to be held. I'd just soon they be held in Omaha.
Thank you. Further comments or questions to the item before us? Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Following up on Commissioner Boyle's concerns, I share them, and I'm not excited about incarcerating any more kids. We keep talking in the juvenile justice discussions ongoing about lowering the population of kids in our custody. This doesn't do that. This goes in the other direction. Every time that we come to a decision point about the population in our juvenile justice system, the number either stays the same or goes up. This is not where we want to go. We are locked in currently, I don't know if that'll last, to a kids' jail downtown that's even smaller in capacity than the one that we enjoy at the youth center on 42nd Street. So adding any non-essential custodial kids to our incarceration population is exactly the wrong way to go. I did request some backup information from Deputy County Administrator for Juvenile Services, Kim Havakati, who I believe is here. And I want to thank you for that. This goes to, kind of the metrics of what we're talking about. We had a discussion last time, and the questions that were left unanswered were the average length of stay of these kids and how much revenue is involved here, and whether or not they could be detained for immigration purposes. And Kim Havakati, responding to some of those questions, indicated that the state law relative to our ability to detain or jail kids prohibits us from doing that for civil purposes. And much of immigration law is considered civil, although not all. And I think there's probably some folks here today, either in person or by Zoom, who will address that. It's a dangerous area to go into when you're dealing with the federal government, particularly under its current management, relative to allowing them access to your jails, because they can then determine who they're going to put in there. And that seems to be a dangerous area with this administration in Washington relative to immigrants. So the information that we got back indicated, and I'm just quoting from what Ms. Havakati sent us, that youth charges adult, the average length of stay this past year was 175 days. And that's an extremely long length of stay in our youth facility. This is a concern to me, because if we're going to downsize the facility and you're adding population that you don't need to, no state requirement that we house federal prisoners in any of our facilities, you're going in the wrong direction. It's probably a mistake to go in the direction that the kids' jail downtown is in the first place, but this adds fuel to that fire. And I'm just concerned that we're looking at an agreement here that's unnecessary, uncalled for, and probably bad for the kids in our community. But it's what the federal government wants. And I think we do have a choice. We don't work for the federal government. We're creatures of the Nebraska legislature. And nobody in the legislature is telling us to do this. I do have a couple of questions relative to the terms and conditions of this contract. And I think our county attorney might have been involved in the negotiations of that, if we could just go into that real briefly. Council, I think Commissioner Boyle indicated that this is an agreement that we've had in the past. When was the last time we contracted with the federal government for these services?
I don't have that. I know that this is a contract that we've had for many, many years with them.
What's the term of the contract?
For this particular go-around, I don't see that there is an end. I believe it's on page 3 where that information is, but I don't see that there's an end date to the term. Let's see.
So I guess that's problematic. I don't remember voting on this contract, and I've been here for 5 years or so. And this appears to be an open-ended extension of an existing contract, which makes me even more uncomfortable.
If you note on the bottom of page 3, it allows for termination for convenience with a mere 30 days calendar notice.
And that seems to be like we can terminate on 30 days notice, they can terminate on 30 days notice. Is that your read?
Yes, it's for any reason.
Okay. The prior contract, was it a similar termination clause in the prior contract?
I don't have that in front of me.
Okay. I think that, this is something that we're doing a favor for the federal government, and I'm not satisfied with the terms of this contract being in our favor that much. I understand that they decided not to further negotiate with us after the county attorney pointed out to them. I think that that's not good enough, that we should go back and say, if you want to have our facility at your disposal, we need a couple of changes in this contract. And one of them is an ironclad, no immigration holds for any reason are going to be held in our youth center. Another one, I think that we need, in addition to the 30-day clause, an actual term on this contract. It's going to become real problematic if we go ahead with this kids jail downtown to accommodate the children already in our custody, much less unnecessary additions from the federal government.
If I may, our office did negotiate with the U.S. Attorney and the U.S. Marshal. We did talk about an end date. That was not something that they wanted to do, and so what is here is the termination for convenience.
And I appreciate that. I think you've done, as much as you can to push the ball. I'm a little taken aback by the arrogance of the federal authorities who are asking us for a favor, saying that they're not willing to negotiate what is regularly a part of any contract. Terms and conditions are terms and conditions, and this doesn't have a term, and the conditions are not satisfactory.
Okay, I'm going to call time on this. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to item A? And I would say, as Commissioner Boyle pointed out, this doesn't impact how many kids get arrested or detained. It simply impacts where they get detained. If it's a local kid, we have an opportunity to keep them in our local community, or we can ship them off to Kansas City or wherever. LaVon, did you have?
My name is LaVon Stennis Williams, 1941 South 42nd Street, and I'm speaking in capacity as the executive director of a youth program, and I just think this is a bad idea. The Douglas County government will become complicit in all of the failed policies of our government when it comes to detaining youth, immigrant youth. First of all, from what I'm reading, we're not ever sure of the age, and we could come into a conflict with the separation by sight and sound of adults getting into our juvenile justice system because we're not sure of the age of some of the kids that will be detained. Oftentimes that happens a lot. Secondly, the mere fact that who is going to be responsible for the education, the mental health care, and all the other needs that these children will require? And then what happens when you reach your capacity and you're no longer able to accommodate the kids from our community who are being held for delinquency charges with these kids? Are we going to have a double tier or a two-tier system for supporting our youth? And our youth matter whether they are from the immigration population from our community. And I don't think a kid who's being detained for purposes, when you say we're not going to ever detain them for immigration holds, we cannot rely on the government. We cannot rely on them to tell the truth, but that's what that detain is for. And so what I would just say is that this is a time now to cut bait if that is a policy of the government, because you do not want to become complicit with what we're hearing about the stories that are taking place in the places like Kansas City and other places where these kids are being held, and the inhumane conditions that they have to experience, as well as the lack of education, the lack of health care, the lack of access to things that would redeem them or rehabilitate them. And so you have to ask the purpose, if they're not being held for detainee reasons, then why are they being held? And so I am strongly opposed to this. I think that for my major reason for being opposed to it is because we will be complicit. We will become complicit with a failed government system for how we treat our youth.
Thank you, LaVon. Further questions or comments to item A?
Hello, my name is Alexis Steele, and I'm the policy staff attorney with the Immigrant Legal Center. I really appreciate your time this morning, especially on this item, and everyone that's spoken so far. I just want to address a couple things. And to start off by saying we do sympathize with the benefits. Our organization, one of our leading principles is family unity and community wholeness. That said, we recognize by reviewing the contract in full that its terms, as have been criticized, are far too broad and actually do not serve those purposes. And even for the short-term and limited benefit of proximity to family, it is not worth conceding so many things. We want to acknowledge that this contract has been in place that has been placed for so long, and it has not yet been used in this way. That being said, the power of the contract is what it allows and what it permits and not what it does not permit. And so far, what it does permit would be things that position us very poorly. As Commissioner Kavanaugh mentioned, this positions us such that we are looking to eventually have a conflict with state law. It is inappropriate that we have section 43-251.01 in our code, which limits the circumstances under which juveniles may be detained, and that this contract would allow detention for immigration purposes, which, as clarified, are not necessarily criminal matters. The distinguishing and recognizing whether something is an immigration matter, is civil or criminal, is a fact-intensive, case-by-case evaluation that I don't see any plan that the DCYC has for evaluating and for assuming the liability that comes with an inaccurate assessment. Furthermore, if detentions do happen and they are related to immigration, we expose Nebraska as a whole to liability for various violations of due process and other concerns that contracts like these do not remove us from. Couple other quick things. I appreciate that we've spent a lot of time on this. This simply goes against our values. As another community leader has spoken out on behalf of a youth center, this deprives children of things that they need. As an attorney that represents individuals here in Nebraska, we're familiar, our firm, with how the impact, the negative impact that detention can have on a child's opportunity to access justice, and the difference that detention has in access to an attorney and ergo success in immigration court, which is unfortunately, as in other courts, related to representation and access there too. The fact that Douglas County Youth Correction Services have been party to this contract for so long with these existing concerns is not a reason to continue the contract. It's actually the opposite. It's a very strong reason for us to use extreme caution in renewing this contract. And if the party that is looking to benefit from our local services and our local resources that are funded locally is not willing to amend the contract or negotiate with us on our terms, why are we entering this, and why are we dedicating state resources in a way that doesn't have those benefits? I'm happy to go on further, but I don't want to take up more time where I want to open up for any questions that you might have for me, and I thank you for your
Yes.
time.
Claire, can I speak?
Is it a question or a comment, Commissioner Kraft?
Both.
If-
Question for Alexis.
All right, go ahead with the
I'd like-
question.
I'd like to know whether or not, I believe you are an attorney and you're with whom again?
I'm with the Immigrant Legal Center. Thank you. Formerly
And
known as
you are-
Justice for Our Neighbors.
Thank you, and you are an attorney.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Because I do believe you may have just changed my vote from being in favor of it, and I'm still analyzing it. I'll wait till I see what other people say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. If it would be helpful to send over any citations and things like that, I would be happy to send that over later at your convenience. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle.
Well, you make very good arguments, except I keep coming back to, if they are not held here in Douglas County and receiving excellent health care, I believe, and also being treated very well by our staff and educated as well. There's an Omaha Public School inside the facility. If we don't have them here, where would they be? Because they will be held. And so, I mean, maybe if it's just the argument you make that we're being a party to this sort of thing, I understand that. But if we turn this down, it could actually be a little bit worse for the children because they won't be close to the city from which they're from. They won't be close to Omaha. and won't have the kind of ability that they do here to be in contact. That's probably the biggest thing for me. And we know the standard of care that they're going to receive here. It's excellent. I don't know what goes on in any other youth facility anywhere in the country. I've read about things. I've read about some horrible things going on at the border with young children and sexual assaults and just ungodly, unconscionable things. That's not happening to these young people. There's no one there now. But that's what I keep going back to. If they're not here, where would they be?
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Teresa, did you have?
Yeah, if I may, Teresa, York County Attorney's Office. I just wanted to offer a few points for some additional clarity for the board. It was raised regarding sight and sound, and that's a reference to juveniles have to be kept separate, both visually and auditorily from adults. And it's my understanding that the federal age for majority when you become a grown-up is 18, and so all of these kids would be under 18. And so there, as far as detaining any of the youth at the youth center, there would not be a violation of the jail standards related to housing adults and juveniles together, sight and sound. And so that should be fine under this contract. In addition, I wanted to direct this board's attention to the bottom of page 1 of the contract. And it says under the bottom of page 1, number 17 and number 18, there's some check boxes. And 17 and 18 defined authorized, 18 defines an authorized agency user, and 17 defines the federal detainee. The federal detainee is defined, check boxes are male, juvenile, and female juvenile, so again, not adults. And then 18, ICE is not checked. ICE is not an authorized user under the contract. And so I simply wanted to provide those notations for the board.
Thank you, Teresa. Appreciate the clarification. Further questions or comments? Good morning, Larry.
Good morning. Larry Storer, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I too am against this. I think I expressed some views on it last week. My primary view is, you know, I don't know everything about this because it's not reported on. All we know is what's said here today, for example. And I might add, by the way, I can hear practically everybody, but a lot of you commissioners do not speak into your microphone, so it's hard to hear you.
Okay.
Please do so. Because I'm not a community partner and I'm not a cub reporter, I'm just a normal citizen that hears things here and there, and it makes me wonder, part of this debate ought to be, are we a sanctuary city, a sanctuary county, a sanctuary state, but also, isn't there a state law that says we will not send children out of state? Haven't the state of Nebraska been in trouble for that? Hasn't Douglas County been in trouble for that? Didn't one of the retired juvenile judges be in trouble for that? Or wasn't that part of a debate years ago? I believe it was. It's not easy to come up for solutions, I know. But oftentimes the public, the parents, are not involved in it. And somebody else that's a community partner or a 501c3 with best practices makes those decisions and recommendations to you, and you adopt them. Now, who came up with this idea to let the federal government? All we know is put detainees in the Douglas County Youth Center. To me, I said, are those hardened criminals? It doesn't say. Why? It doesn't say who. And then I wonder, well, what did you do with the youth? Did you move the youth out somewhere else? Did you send them home? I know there's a pressure for you to send them home, to get them out, get them educated, and send them back home, but maybe they don't have parents. Maybe they don't have a father. They're detained for some reason. They committed some sort of infraction, but now you're going to expose them to federal detainees? I don't think so. And just listening today, yes, I couldn't hear absolutely everything. I can hear most everybody. But what's this business about Kansas City? Federal? Okay, but still, isn't there a state law that says you won't send our kids out? Even though maybe even they're possibly illegal, we still don't send kids out of state. So there's some serious things here that need to be addressed openly with the public before you do your votes. Thank you.
I'll make
Commissioner
one
Boyle.
last comment.
Okay.
You know, I want to stress that the U.S. Marshals, for the most part, are probably men and women from Nebraska and Iowa. You know, their office is located 2 blocks from here. And I've gone through it, and I knew the former U.S. Marshal, Marshal Martinez, very well. And so, I mean, first of all, I have a lot of faith in them. As I know their job is challenging and we can criticize them easily because of their titles, but they're 2 blocks from here. They're not, you know, they're not some people swooping in from Washington or something else. They're our neighbors. That's who they are.
Thank you.
Doesn't make it any easier, but that's who they are.
Further questions or comments to item A before we vote? Then I would-
If I may add one more comment, I greatly appreciate your attention. I want to follow up everything that's been said with, again, to reiterate an extreme sympathy for all of the emotional factors at play, including what will happen if we don't have this, what will happen in Kansas City and things like that. However, I will urge the board to remain, to adhere to logic, which is that those emotional appeals are strong and powerful and real, but legally speaking, there are real concerns about conflicts with our law, liability exposure, and those facts. None of the emotional appeals actually address those facts, and I hear that we have perhaps that we need to find a solution in general for this situation, but I urge the board to consider the facts that suggest that this contract is not appropriate for us. Thank you so much, and I invite you to reach out to me. I'll share my contact information after.
Thank you. Further questions or comments?
I just
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
would maybe recommend that we lay this over again and see if we can make some adjustments to this contract along the lines that we've spoke about this morning, and taking into consideration some of the concerns that Ms. Steele has from an immigration lawyer point of view. I think those should be taken seriously. We don't need to rush to judgment on this, and I'd rather do it right than do it quick. So I would move that we lay this over indefinitely until we can get some more clarification. And, you know, I understand that the county attorney has used their best efforts in negotiating with the Marshal Service. Maybe we should step it up and negotiate directly with the Marshal Service. Like Commissioner Boyle, I know the Marshal, and I've dealt with them over time. They're right down the street, so it shouldn't be a big thing for us to directly engage them in negotiating a contract that could severely impact our youth detention facilities from a point of view of population and federal use of local resources along lines that we are probably not comfortable with. So I'd move to lay it over indefinitely.
We have a motion for an indefinite layover. Is there a second to that motion?
You know, I'll give him a second because I think we need to move on with this. And so I'll give him a second. Let's see how it goes.
All right, then the motion before us is an indefinite layover of item A. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Then could we please vote on that?
One moment, please. Okay.
I vote no.
Motion fails. Commissioner Kavanaugh and Boyle voting yes, other commissioners voting no.
Okay, the motion fails. That brings us back to the original motion on the floor to approve item A. Questions or comments at this point now to that? If not, I would like to call for the vote on item A.
I vote no.
Motion passes. Commissioners Kavanaugh, Boyle, and Kraft voting no, all other commissioners voting yes.
Thank you. This brings us then to item B, a resolution to approve agreement extension with Mostek Law for environmental related legal services, $40,000 budgeted. Commissioner Boyle?
Well, I read this over, and it started out as a contract several years ago for $10,000. And then it went to 20, and now it's at 40. And I'm really curious, first of all, is what is it they're doing that they're so specialized that they're making that kind of money? And I don't know what they're producing. I don't mean to be a...
They're lawyers. They don't produce anything.
I'm sorry?
They're lawyers. They don't produce
Oh,
anything.
my God. Well, I know they're with, they're working, it's for the, let's see, what is it? Is it the environmental services?
Mike, why don't I just go to, well, either Teresa or we also have Brian Norton on
Oh, very good. I'm
telephonically,
happy to defer. if you'd like to.
Brian, can you unmute yourself here and tell us a little more about what's going on?
Who's Brian?
No, he works for Environmental Services.
Okay.
He's the one that oversees all this.
Commissioners, this is Kent Holm. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, just very briefly, yes, there are a number of environmental law issues that come up, and when we have some of these come up, and these may be related to things like underground storage tanks, things that are related to the State Street landfill, various remediation type things. We have typically, and we will continue to first look to the county attorney's office. We talk directly with Teresa, and in consultation with her, we make a decision on some of these items which they feel, which Teresa feels that they simply don't have the expertise in this specialized environmental law field to be able to adequately advise us. So in those situations only, then we have this contract with Mostek Law. Mike Mostek and his firm has done excellent work for us in the past on a variety of issues where environmental law comes into play. And therefore, this is simply a situation where he is used as needed, but we always, and I stress always, go to Teresa and her folks in the county attorney's office, because most of the time they can help us with this, but we do get into situations where specific environmental laws require expertise beyond what the county attorney's office has, and Teresa then advises us of that, and we have used that. And Teresa has come to us to use it on a couple other occasions where she has some things in other departments that also kind of fall into that realm. So hopefully that kind of explains why we have the contract. And again, we don't use it unless we absolutely need to.
Thank you.
If I may.
Commissioner Kraft.
Yes. Is this a cap at 40,000 and we only get charged for the hours we are used? Or is this a flat 40,000?
Commissioner, it's a former. We only get charged for what we use, and yes, the 40,000 is not to exceed.
Okay.
Thank you. That's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm.
Thank you. Teresa, did you have anything else you wanted to add to the conversation?
I think Kent did a really nice job of explaining it. I would add that oftentimes our office does work up a project. We've consulted Mike after we've worked the project up. Environmental law is a very specialized area. There are pretty severe consequences if not all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. So we have appreciated working with Mike and having him take a look at some of the things that we've done. And it has benefited, Kent's correct, other departments have utilized it when they've had an environmental question, and we've worked with Mike for other departments as well. And it is a cap not to exceed. There are years it is not utilized anywhere near the cap. So
Thank you, Teresa. Further questions or comments to item B? Commissioner Boyle.
Well, I do. We started out, and I'd like to ask Kent if he could tell us, maybe, or someone else could tell us what we have actually paid for these services. We started out with $10,000, and I'm looking back on the $10,000 a year, and I'm looking back to see when that started. Maybe you know, Kent, but that started out at 10, and then the next time the contract was removed and, amended for another 5 years, it went from 10,000 to 25,000, and that was in 2015, and then in 2018 it went from 25,000 to 40,000, and I don't think this area of the law is so specialized that we only have one lawyer in the area who can do this, and I know that with professional contracts we don't have to bid, which I think is appropriate that we don't bid, but I think we're kind of locked into if you say 40,000, the bill's going to be $39,900 or 40. I'd really like to do something. The hourly rate, is it the same? Is it $345 an hour? Is that what it's
yes,
going to
yes, I believe so. I believe so. Yes.
It's going to remain $345 an hour?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'd like to see us take a look to see if there isn't. I know of one person who worked for Union Pacific and was involved, a lawyer who was involved in environmental issues, and a very competent woman who's a good lawyer, and maybe we can find, see if there's someone else who do this for less money and also give us the service we need. I don't know, it seems like it's pretty, I guess what bothered me is the acceleration of the money. Went from 10 to 25 and now to 40, and I just think that's pretty hefty. I don't know how often we use them, but if you have $40,000 in there, I'd be surprised if it doesn't, I'm sorry, but if it doesn't reach to 40 when the bills come in. So I'd like at least to maybe lay this over for 2 or 3 weeks and explore the possibility of other law firms that could do this kind of work, and see if we can't get something that's more competitive. If we can't, then we'll have to do what this is, but I don't know about I'm not real high on a $40,000 cap. I think that's excessive. So I'd make a motion to lay this over for 3 weeks until we can get information on who else in our legal community could perform this service and at what price, just to be sure we're getting what we get.
Could I suggest 2 weeks? I'm thinking we don't meet in 3 weeks.
Well, do it.
Either 2 or 4, but
Let's do 4.
All right. Mr. Clerk, can you just double check real quick and make sure we're meeting 4 weeks from today?
Dan Esch, County Clerk. 4 weeks would be Tuesday, July 28th, and we do meet that day.
The 28th?
Yeah.
Well, that would be my motion. I think we ought to explore this and see if this is the right thing. If it is, so be it. But if it isn't, then we ought to find somebody else who can do the same work without the acceleration clauses that occur here.
All right. We have a motion and a second to lay item A over for 4 weeks. Question to Kent, or perhaps Teresa, will this impact your activities? Are you without counsel now if we do this?
Commissioner, this is Kent. My understanding, I believe this term of this current agreement goes through July, if I'm not mistaken. And I guess if I could just address Commissioner Boyle's in the concern about the kind of the acceleration of the dollar amount in the contract. This contract was, I believe, first entered into in 2015 at $10,000 amount. Shortly thereafter, there were a couple of things that came into play that required some environmental legal work. And one of those was with I believe, the City of Omaha situation at Heartland of America Park and some of the potential environmental liability that the county would still have if the city were to go in and to do some other work that would disturb some of the original remediation there. That was one of the projects there, and I think that may have escalated some of that. And then there were also some landfill related environmental discussions with them and some consultations with MasTec Law in that general time frame. So I think what we saw there was kind of a one-time escalation there where we needed to have that amount to cover those anticipated fees. Brian, I believe you're on the line as well. I don't have in front of me, I apologize, I don't have the amount that was spent in this past fiscal year. But Brian, if you have that, if you could chime in, otherwise we will get that information for you if you need that.
Say, Kent, excuse me, I'm sorry, I appreciate your narrative, but this is something that should be discussed in the month that we're going to lay this over, if we vote to do that. This anecdotal information is not helpful. We don't have it in writing. We don't. You can't follow it real well. I'd appreciate it if we could meet during this month and decide what we're going to do, and you could do the information. Please present the information that you have to support your decision. I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Okay. I will not be supporting the layover. I think we're fixing something that isn't broken. The motion before us is to lay this over for 4 weeks. Further questions or comments to the motion? Then could we please vote?
I vote no.
Okay, motion to lay over 4 weeks by Commissioner Boyle, second by Commissioner Morgan. Motion passes 4-3. Commissioners Rogers, Duda, and Kraft voting no. Other commissioners voting yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That concludes the consent agenda. I'm not aware of anything under recognitions and proclamations, so that brings us to citizens' comments. This is the opportunity for anybody that would like to address this board for anything that is not on the agenda. This is your chance to do so. But if you're going to speak, come on down.
Luis Jimenez, 3306 Burt Street. I'll take this opportunity to speak on something that's not on the agenda, mainly because there was discussion on the environmental contract with the county landfill. So I just wanted to repeat my idea of organizing an effort to collect waste or things that go to the county landfill into the neighborhoods. I've seen dumpsters that are big containers that people use privately get filled up right away, and it's not from what the expected use is. It's from people bringing in their trash and then filling those up, and then they have to go dump that and then bring it back for the purpose that they intended to use. So I think there's an opportunity here for me to repeat this idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Would anybody else like to speak during citizens' comments?
I'll get it later. Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. Today I'd like to mention a little bit about the rules. But I'd like to recognize that we do have a Boy Scout back here today that's working on his merit badge. And so maybe he understands the rules and maybe he doesn't. I really don't think many of the citizens understand them, but as a new person to the chambers, I wonder if he and his advisor understand the printed rules that were handed out front before you can come in. And as I recall last week, I believe the rules may have been violated because as I understand that printed document back there, the presentation part listed on there says that it's for citizen comments. Well, I think we were scooted out of here in a hurry because the next body was going to meet after two people from Douglas County Corrections had a rather long presentation. On your printed agenda there, it says the presentation part is for citizens. When they spoke last week, they weren't speaking just as citizens, they were speaking as employees. And experienced employees in the correction center who have some complaints that haven't not been addressed. But they went beyond the time limit that is printed on your rules out there that's handed out. When I came to the microphone, you didn't really want to let me speak because you had to hurry up and give somebody else the microphone before the city council came in. And when I protested a little bit there, you said, okay, 30 seconds. Yeah, I broke the rules by continuing to talk. I want to thank you for not asking the sheriff's deputy to escort me out last week. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Anybody else wishing to address this board under citizens' comment? Okay, next on the agenda is the CARES Act update. And Joe? Oh, Patrick.
Good morning, Commissioners. Patrick, Bloomingdale County Administrator. We also have Melissa Seawick here from General Assistance, and Joe Lawrence can also participate as well. So we've been meeting in the last week with Deloitte to try to come up with a process to handle the rental assistance issue. And we had talked at the last county board meeting, the last committee meeting initially about using nonprofits. But as we got into more discussion and looked at what other jurisdictions did and are doing, talking with Deloitte about what their experiences and what they've seen nationwide, is that my understanding is that most of the other jurisdictions that are doing this are doing it in-house.
Can you speak up, Patrick?
That most of the jurisdictions that are doing the rental assistance have decided to do it in-house as much as possible because we can't, one, we can't just give money to nonprofits that we would like to give them to. Under federal regulations, we would have to do an application process, which takes longer. Then we have to vet the applications that are submitted by nonprofits. County board would then have to select those nonprofits that they deem they want to do business with. And then my understanding is some of those nonprofits, their standard procedure is to work with other nonprofits, which is another layer of delay and accountability. So it's our recommendation that we just move forward to try to do it in-house as much as possible. And what we would do is we would use, Deloitte has 90,000 employees nationwide. And what they've done to work and provide services with the state on their CARES Act issues is to reassign employees that have experience with doing application processes and vetting applications on other matters and use them to do this process, to take applications directly and work with general assistance to get this done in a rapid process so we can get the money out as quickly as possible. I think that also, not only is it quicker, it provides more direct accountability because as I know, and it's becoming almost just too redundant, is that we're ultimately responsible for how the money is spent. So that is going to be our recommendation. We're going to have Melissa present the process that we've put together, working with Deloitte and looking at what other jurisdictions have done. And it's really a work in process. The process that we've put together is not complete. We're still working on it diligently. We're hoping to get it done within the next week. Certainly no more than 2 weeks, but within the next week if we can. It's got to be a federally compliant process and a process that's efficient and effective. So I'll have Melissa do that. The other issue I just wanted to bring up really quickly is an issue regarding, I'll just call them undocumented residents. So those that are not, I don't know if you say not here in the country legally or however you want to describe it. So there is, and we've been talking to Deloitte about this, there is a provision in the CARES Act in regards to stimulus checks.
In regard to what?
Stimulus checks.
Okay.
That those people that we're talking about, they're not here legally or however you want to describe it, they don't qualify for those under the CARES Act. The coronavirus relief fund that we're talking about, the guidelines, the frequently asked questions, are silent on that issue. Deloitte is concerned that the federal government would be consistent with the CARES Act portion in regards to the stimulus checks when talking about that population of people. They are working to try to get more guidance from the federal government in that regard. My opinion is that if we can, we should provide that assistance to those people if we can. So we want to get further guidance and see if there's a way we can do that without putting us in a position where we're not compliant. So with that being said, I'm going to have Melissa present this. She will give a PowerPoint. It's still in draft form because it's not complete yet, but she will provide it, make that presentation. And if there is not serious concerns by the board, we would just move forward with it and get it solidified and move forward so we can do it as quickly as possible. We don't have a board meeting for another 2 weeks, so we just like to get this done within the next week and get it moving.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Thank you. And Patrick, thank you for that. I'm a little unclear. What people were you talking about?
So undocumented residents, those that are not in the country legally. I mean, I don't know what the commonly accepted term to use for them is. It's undocumented workers or undocumented residents or however you want to refer to them.
And you're saying that people would have to document their citizenship?
So it's a little unclear to me because the CARES Act says in regards to the stimulus checks that they don't qualify for those. So the concern is that going to also apply to the coronavirus relief fund? That if you do rental assistance or other kind of assistance, that they would have to provide some proof of the fact that they're here in the country legally.
Okay, well,
a legal green card, whatever it is that they would
Sure, I
provide.
understand what you're saying now. I was just trying to capture what people you're talking about.
Right.
The number of stimulus checks, the amount, dollar amount, that went to dead people is now over $1 billion, and nobody is moving to collect that. That's just gone. And all of the other discussions that we've had on CARES contracts, we had, millions and millions last week with the health department, public property. No discussion of any of them doing business with documented or undocumented individuals. Simply, when we get down to rent assistance, we have this question of documentation, whether or not it's required. I don't know why we're being particular about this program when it's never come up before. Deloitte didn't have to show proof of citizenship when we gave them a $5 billion contract. Why are we just raising this on this one program and not, CARES wide in terms of our expenditures on CARES that we've already approved? Why is this one being singled out?
What I can tell you is that it was pointed out to us by Deloitte, who is working with other states and the jurisdictions around the country, that this is a concern that they are trying to get more guidance from the federal government on. Like I said, my recommendation is that we should do it as long as we have a good comfort level that we're not going to put ourselves in a precarious position. If the other part of the CARES Act didn't have that provision about the stimulus checks, then I don't think this would even be an issue. But I think that is the current, and what they're just telling me is they're trying to get that clarification. So if we receive some kind of ironclad guidance from the federal government that says you cannot do this, then that is a concern. But if it's just going to remain silent, then I think that I don't understand why we would not provide rental assistance to those who need it just because they're not here legally.
Our rental assistance program is designed to serve residents of Douglas County. I think that's the only requirement that we have for general assistance.
Do you provide it for, do you have to? So for under our general assistance program, they do have to provide. proof of citizenship.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Under
Jim,
the-
can I ask you
under
to
the
talk
general-
into the mic?
Under the general assistance program, they do, according to Melissa, they do have to provide proof of citizenship to get those general assistance benefits.
You're just draining off.
So under the general assistance program,
Yeah.
where we provide benefits, residents do have to show proof of citizenship.
That's what I thought.
So this would be consistent with that, although my personal opinion is if there's a way we can do it for them, we should, because I think it's the right thing to do. The question is it something that's going to come back to bite us later when the federal government audits us?
Well, Patrick, I like your thoughts, but I think we're asking for trouble. I don't think they'll approve that. Just look at who's trying to run the country. That's not going to happen. I think we'd really be risking a lot. I'm all for it, but I think that nonprofits ought to step up. The ones who are receiving money from individuals in Omaha and other places who are giving cash to Together Incorporated or whoever, they ought to make sure they don't have any federal funds at all, and they could give the money to the people who are not documented. They definitely need help. I had a call from One World, and they need help with rental assistance with their patients, and many of them are not documented, and they're Spanish speaking. So we need to get this thing rolling. As long as I've got you going, what are you talking about this 2 weeks? You're saying that, and I couldn't hear you when you're going to take 2 weeks to do
So we hope to have this process that Melissa's going to present to you today. We hope to have this process done within the next week so we can get this money going and rolling it out.
What is the process involved about telling us who can
Right, so
apply?
the application, what the criteria is, how it's going to work, how we're going to do the applications for the landlords to be paid the rent, because the money will go straight to the landlords. So Melissa will, just shortly here, will give a PowerPoint presentation on what that presentation is going to look like.
During this presentation, will someone tell us who can apply and how they apply? I've been asking
Right,
for that.
yes.
Okay, I'll wait. I'll be quiet then. Thank you. Wait for that.
Oops. How do I? Can you help me get this? How do I get the thumbs? I put it up right there.
I've got my hammer if you need help.
Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning, Melissa Sewick with General Assistance. Okay, so we have
Be sure
been
you
working.
speak way into the microphones.
We have been working diligently the past few days since the 10 million has been allocated for rental assistance. And this is what we've come up with thus far. Again, it is a drafted version, the very basics of what we are thinking the program will look like as far as who qualifies, how they apply, the documentation that we would require from them, max benefits, and then our next steps. Okay, the Douglas County CARES Rental Assistance Program provides funds to assist low-income eligible county residents with unpaid rent due to COVID-19 related hardship. This program is intended to stabilize housing for the low-income residents and those at greatest risk due to a loss of employment and/or loss of work hours due to COVID-19. This program's assistance shall not exceed 3 months of a household's rental need and/or a maximum benefit of $3,000, whichever comes first. Again, this is a drafted version as far as the amounts goes. Those amounts were figured out by looking at the need within the county. We've looked at what the typical rent amounts are. We also looked at some of the information that Match provided as far as their average requests that they have been asked for rental assistance. The general requirements of this program are going to be a person has to, or a household has to be a Douglas County resident. As Patrick stated, currently it is a U.S. citizen or qualified resident alien. And again, that will change if we are able to get more verification on that. Had a household income below 80% of the area median income before COVID-19. The next screen I will show you will be how that's broken down and what that looks like. Applicant is listed on the rental/lease agreement. Income was negatively impacted due to COVID-19, inability to pay rent due to COVID-19, and not currently receiving the extra $600 per week stimulus benefit for unemployment insurance. And again, a lot of these were what we were seeing other counties doing as far as the extra $600 a week stimulus benefit. That was pretty much universally done within the counties that were administering these funds, and the extra $600 per week on unemployment is going to be ending on July 25th. So this is an example of the area median income, the 80% for Douglas County. So a one-person household has to be at or below $48,750 to receive assistance. And the 80% area median income that's what the HUD definition for somebody that is low income. This is what the threshold they have to be at. Required documentation for an applicant, they would have to provide us photo identification. Again, that wouldn't just be a state issued ID. We know that's difficult for some people to get. We just need to be able to verify that name and that picture. For the General Assistance Program, we accept a wide array of documentation regarding photo ID. Demonstration of financial hardship in the form of pay stubs or income documentation. So we're looking at unemployment document, furlough letter, letter from employer showing a reduction of hours or wages, prior loss or reduction in income due to COVID-19. That's a typo on my end. And then we would require a copy of the current lease, a verification from the landlord stating the amount and the month's rent is owed. They can either provide a notice to vacate or eviction as well. A completed W-9 from the landlord, we would need that in order to provide payment. And we would also want a statement from the landlord stating they will not evict for non-payment for the months that we have assisted the client with that rental aid. We think that's really important because, again, being the General Assistance Program, that's one of our stipulations, that we are not going to go and pay all this back rent for you to turn around and evict that person. So our next steps are to finalize the program requirements, FAQ, and application. We have, I think, a good rough draft of that already. Design an online system for the submission, review, and authorization for the applications. So that would be how the person applies, and then also on the end of with getting assistance from Deloitte to process those applications. Formalize the payment process with the clerk's office, circulate the program information to all appropriate channels. We will go ahead and do that within Douglas County. We will hit all the nonprofits and give them that information, also through the media, social media, and our website, things like that. And then we hope to launch the program very quickly. So that was our short and sweet version of our program. Again, we've been working diligently on this, and we're very confident we can get this up and running fairly quickly.
Thank you for that, Melissa. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Thanks for this. This doesn't appear in our backup documents. Could you make sure that we all receive a copy of this?
Absolutely.
This is a difficulty that's ongoing with materials. I think a week ago we requested the same from the director of the Douglas County Health Center, and we're still waiting for hard copies of that. It concerns me that a $166 million project like this receives no backup information that the commissioners or the public can review before the meetings. This is the one page, all that's available on this briefing today. So please make sure, if you can, that we receive actual copies of what you're going to present to us, and the public does as well, so that they miss the screen presentation that you just did, they're out of luck. That's just not good enough. I think that we need to have documentation going forward and before the meetings, if possible, for what we're going to be talking about here, rather than just seeing it at the last minute.
And commissioners, I'd like to respond to that. We've been working on this all weekend as well. Melissa's been trying to get this put together as quickly as possible. So under normal circumstances, we would have done that, but this thing was going up to the last minute to try to make sure it was done and ready to present for this meeting.
And
So
I appreciate that, Patrick. We've had the money for 3 months. Hearings have been ongoing for more than a month on this. The last one was last Thursday. So it's not like it's been on your desk for the last 48 hours. It's been going on for months. And this is, just going forward, let's try to do better in terms of getting documentation of how we're going to spend $166 million out before the actual meeting.
Commissioners, I'd like to respond to that as well. That is just simply not an accurate representation of what has happened. We received direction at the last meeting, and we've been working diligently since that time. We were not given direction months ago to start putting a process together. We act upon the board's direction, and we work diligently to get it done.
Yeah, and as far as accuracy goes, we had a meeting on this exact topic on May 28th. You were there. We had another meeting on this exact topic a week ago. You were there. This isn't a last-minute thing. We've discussed this in open meetings at the county board. So if you want to be clear on that, the minutes are available of those meetings on the clerk's website, and people can look for themselves in terms of accuracy. This isn't a last-minute 48-hour deal. So we disagree on that. That's fine. Moving on, the documentation that we're requiring here, is this the same documentation that's required to qualify for the current general assistance program for rent assistance?
Some of it is, but we did not look at all at our program as far as any requirements for this program. This is being looked at completely separate. We're requiring as little information as possible to be in compliance with the funding.
Okay. The participation of Deloitte in this, and I think it's important that we have them looking at other jurisdictions who are already in the business of providing general assistance to their residents. Were they the ones providing the guidelines that are already in effect in other counties and other states regarding CARES rent assistance programs?
Once we had the 10 million and we knew we could move forward with that and looking at that picture a lot more clearly, we went ahead and started doing our own research. And I met with Deloitte, staff person from Deloitte on Friday after another meeting, and we were going back and forth with what we have been able to gather from other counties, other cities, and then also, again, what is going to ensure that we are compliant with the funding that we are looking to give out to the residents of Douglas County.
Okay, and I hope that you're keeping track of those meetings, because Deloitte's charging us by the hour, and they have a $5 million cap, which I'm sure they're eager to reach. What about the participation of not-for-profits in this process? Is there going to be any participation of not-for-profits in this process?
How we have it, what we're looking at now, we are not looking to have any nonprofits participate in it. We're looking to work with Deloitte and partner with them. We think that's the most efficient and effective way to get the funding out. Now that we have more information. Again, we didn't have that Deloitte contract when we met in May. That Deloitte contract was implemented 2 weeks ago, and then we met again last week. So now that we have the facts and we know how to proceed and what other counties are doing, we have a clearer picture, and we think that running it through the county is the best way to do it for the residents of Douglas County.
Thank you. I'll have some more questions in a minute.
Thank you. Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you. Thank you, Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Patrick and Melissa. I think this is really good. And again, it pretty much has been a quick turnaround, because we just voted to approve rental assistance last week, and you guys started this process and got this much up and going thus far. I think that's great, and I like it. The design online system for submission, I think, is really important, and I think because of the way that people can change the language of the forms, because if you just, my understanding is if you just do an attachment, the language doesn't change, correct?
Yes, that's what we were looking to do. The main way of application would be online, so we can use a translation services so they can easily translate not just from English to Spanish, but
There's
we have
like
a lot of other populations.
Okay, good.
But we were,
Yeah, I like that
yeah,
idea.
and we were also looking at, we understand that there are community members that do not have internet access, a way to reach them and have them apply as well.
Well, and I think that that's where our nonprofits could come into play, is the individuals that are reaching out to them could be the ones that help them through our process now. Thank you. This is really good.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle.
Okay, go over that nonprofit thing again. Way I sounded, it sounded like you said they could pound sand, they're not included. How are they included in this program? How does One World apply for funds through what you've done? How does that work?
Well, right now, our plan is that we will be administering the funds that Douglas County will, with the assistance of Deloitte. They would not necessarily be able to apply, One World would not be able to apply on behalf of One World. But
I'm sorry, I can hardly hear you. One World cannot apply?
They would not be able to apply as One World, but we would be able to have people that they are working with apply for services.
Like who is that?
Residents of Douglas County that meet all of the other.
I'm sorry, who One World is working with?
Yes, individuals that are working with One World, so clients that they are working with, patients that they are working with.
Individually, they have to come.
Yes, but we, like I said, that we are planning on communicating with all of the local nonprofits, communicating with One World, getting the information out as quickly as possible on how to apply and what that looks like, so we can, just as the nonprofits would do.
I think you need to tell us about what you plan to, because we have all these nonprofits asking me anyway, because of who I represent, how to apply, and I haven't been able to find out, you know, how you apply, who can. I'm not even sure who can apply. I've never gotten an answer on that. We need something more, and I'm sorry to be so critical, but when you look at the agenda item that you put on our, and I have on my computer to find out what this is all about, you know what it says? CARES Act update. That's it. There's none of this. You know, I didn't get to read that before you just put it on the screen. It looks pretty good, except I'm really amazed at this tremendous shift you've made from, you chose not to work with nonprofits overnight, it seems, and now you're using this Deloitte to the extent, you know, Mr. Kavanaugh brought up a good point, you know, how are they going to be billing, I think, pretty heftily. But anyway, so we've got this expense. The other thing I want to ask you about is, who is going to be doing the work? I mean, if we don't use nonprofits, or we don't put this together, what are we, who you going to try to train a whole bunch of people to do this, or what's going on?
So, as Deloitte has done with the state, Deloitte has thousands of employees across the country.
At what hourly rate?
I can't tell you that.
Okay.
All I know is that they're currently employed by Deloitte.
We need to know, because if they're working at $27 an hour, I need to know. That's a lot of money, and that takes money away from, I assume you pay that out of the CARES fund, takes money away from people who need to pay rent. So that's a very important factor. What are we paying them per hour, and where are they? Are they in, you know, New York, or where are they? Are they working?
There's different ways we can do this. They have employees nationwide that would do the online, so it really wouldn't matter whether they're in Omaha or not. If the county board wants Deloitte to bring in Omaha residents, they can do that.
That's not the point. You're missing it. I just want to know who's going to work at what pay rate, and does it all have to be on a computer? What about some of the people that I work with who don't have computers? How do they apply? And particularly if they're undocumented, I don't see how the federal government's going to permit that. I think that's a waste of time to look. If you think the Trump administration is going to allow anybody who isn't a voting Republican, pardon me, I shouldn't say that, but I guess if they're not an American citizen, they don't get any help. I mean, just look what he did with those little kids down in Mexico in the big fence. So that's out of the picture. We need to have nonprofits step up, and you need to get it going with them taking care of people who are undocumented. And there's a tremendous need. But don't waste your time with thinking that the federal money is going to help them. I can't imagine that happening. And if it does, I'll eat this laptop, okay? But please find out who's doing the work, at what rate of pay, so we know how much CARES money we're spending on personnel costs.
Sure.
I really want to know
I'll
that.
ask Deloitte what the
And I also want to know how
employees
are we realistically going to be serving undocumented people, and what role does nonprofits play. I think, I cannot imagine, I don't know what you have in mind, I guess I'll ask you, what do you have in mind for One World? I mean, if you're not gonna work with One World, the corporation or whatever they are you saying you're gonna work with each individual client? And who does that?
Go ahead.
This program is open to Douglas County residents, so
Right.
all of the Douglas County residents that meet these general requirements or think they do can apply for benefits. So like I said, we are going to provide all of the information as far as what the FAQs, get the marketing information out to the nonprofits, out to the local communities that are hit hardest, and definitely work with the low-income individuals within Douglas County and have that communication with them where they can have the people apply. And you made reference to people that don't have access to the internet. As I discussed a little bit ago, that we are looking at other avenues for them to apply. What other counties are doing is pretty much only online applications. But as Commissioner Borgeson said, that if they are working with a nonprofit or have a case manager somewhere, that would be a perfect person for them to go ahead and help them fill out that application. One of the options too would even be have like a kiosk in our department where somebody could come in and apply for benefits as well. So again, those are all things that we are going to work out, and we want to reach all of the low-income residents within Douglas County who are possibly eligible, and we want to make it as easy as possible for them to do it. As far as funding, that will go to One World. As far as the rental assistance program, what we are...
It goes to their clients.
It will go to their clients, yes, and it will go to all of the nonprofits' clients. And I believe if we implement this program within the county and we administer the $10 million throughout Douglas County to Douglas County residents, then that opens up more funding for the other nonprofits that are getting money through the city, through, again, that would be federal government, but more of the private funding where they can administer those funds to non-citizens, where we can focus on the citizens and kind of partner together to tackle the need in the community.
Well, I think you should focus on the nonprofits, giving the undocumented people, but, and I have other questions too. There's something on the third slide, it wasn't numbered, but it's number 3, I think. And there was something about, on the third slide about getting people with, first of all, a lot of these people are not low income. They're people who were working and got laid off. So, I mean, they could have been making, pretty good dough and whatever it is. So, I mean, I would not just focus on low income because that's not really who these people are. Some are. But there was one, I think it's the slide before that. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's down there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where it says income was negatively impacted due to COVID-19. It says applicants, let's see, maybe it should be or income was negatively impacted.
I'm going to call time. You've had the floor for 8 minutes now.
Okay. Well,
And this is a comprehensive list. This isn't, they have to comply with all of these requirements.
Let's see. Well, the trouble is we don't.
I have other
Claire,
commissioners waiting.
Claire, the trouble is we don't have it. If you look at what's on your agenda, it's one piece of paper.
Right.
It just says, it's going to be presented by Joe and the finance director submitted, but
Okay, Commissioner Morgan,
how
did
do
you
we
have-
discuss this though?
We will. We are. Commissioner Morgan.
I just want to correct something,
Jeez.
and I stand to be corrected also. It was stated $5 million we're paying Deloitte. That's the state contract that
Right.
they have. I don't want to put any of our staff, in a position of answering. Next week, I'd like to have the contract we have and maybe state that, Joe, Patrick, so that there's not mixed messages going out of here. Because it is not $5 million that the county is paying Deloitte. The state's made a contract that we have nothing to do with. We've contracted ourselves, not through the state, but with them. So just so it's clear.
Thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Relative to that, I don't know if PJ was here the day that contract went through, but basically it mirrored the state contract. I'm just a poor country lawyer, but I can read English. The contract said a $5 million cap. We were doing a contract from the state over my objections, because I think there's blatant conflict of interest, but we can revisit that. I am just following up on some of the questions that we have relative to this. Now, understand, I'm all for us moving ahead with all deliberate speed. And if we can get this in people's pockets or get their rent taken care of in 2 weeks, kudos to everyone involved here. The devil's, of course, always in the details, and the basis is let's get as much of this $10 million we can to people in need as quick as we can. I think we're all on the same page there. I think we want that to happen. So that said, the progress that we're making here, meeting after meeting in the board and in the committees, is good process, but the process needs to ultimately get money to the people. And I'm hearing you say 2 weeks out. That's okay, but understanding that sooner is better, and we're 90 days into having the CARES money, and none of it's been received by people in need for rent assistance. The question that I have is, if the decision is to use Deloitte to help us navigate this, I guess, why is that any different of a qualification than using One World or Together or the homeless coalition people? I mean, I understand if I ask Deloitte, should I use your services to do this, Deloitte's probably going to say yes. Just like if you ask a plumber, do I need a new sink, he's probably going to say yes. If you ask a lawyer, should I sue somebody, they're probably going to say yes, on and on and on. The point is, why is it different to have Deloitte doing this than having our nonprofit community doing this?
Because it's a lot quicker and there's less layers of accountability. So as I stated at the start of the presentation, if we send it out to nonprofits to then take applications, then we would have to submit an application for nonprofits to apply, get those applications in, vet those applications, make a recommendation for the selection of specific nonprofits, and that could be obviously a very competitive process, which takes more time. Then we get the money out to those nonprofits. They need to ramp up, potentially hire additional staff and train them, and then we have to, and then if they, which my understanding is some of them work with other nonprofits to get the money out to them, that's another layer of accountability. So we're trying to get this done as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, to get the money out so rent can be paid, and do it in a way that provides adequate controls so we can be accountable for the money that's spent.
And I appreciate that. I guess the same accountability controls and all of that would apply regardless of whether we used a for-profit like Deloitte or a not-for-profit, would they not? Or is there a different standard for not-for-profits doing the same thing?
Well, using the contract with Deloitte is much more efficient because we don't have to go through an application process whereby we advertise an application for nonprofits to apply, receive those applications, vet those applications, have the county board make the selection of which nonprofits they want to work with and which ones they don't. And then as far as accountability goes, if you can limit it, you're not going to limit it to just one nonprofit. Most likely it's going to be multiple nonprofits, 2, 3, 4, and then you have even more accountability, potentially more delay. So we're just trying to respond to the county board's desire to get this thing done as quickly and efficiently as possible.
And I appreciate that. So is this based on Deloitte's experience around the country and other counties, how other counties are doing it? They're utilizing Deloitte services rather than their nonprofit community services?
Well, yeah, what I can tell you is Deloitte has been working particularly with the state of Nebraska for their services and using Deloitte employees who have experience working with applications and vetting those applications and making sure all the guidelines are complied with. So it's a much quicker ramp up than bringing in new temporary employees and training them and then going from there.
I got you. I mean, using the state of Nebraska does not inspire confidence. They haven't been able to implement Medicaid expansion in 2 years, and they haven't done any rent assistance in Nebraska as far as I'm concerned. So I just point that out because this is, again, part of the problem of certain members of this board doing side deals with the governor to make it the same that the state's doing.
Commissioner
That's a
Boyle?
bigger discussion for another day, but thank you. And let's move as fast as we can on this to get people rent assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle?
I think it's a lot simpler to use our nonprofits right in Omaha. That's ridiculous to say we got to have a company that's incorporated in Delaware do our work. It doesn't make any sense at all. It's going to be much more expensive. They're going to use CARES funds. Instead of going to people who need help, they're going to take it themselves. A big corporation in Delaware is going to get a lot of money because of this. And the idea that, you know, what I would see for, and I'm sorry to keep naming them, but the organization, and I won't name them, the organization in South Omaha at the medical clinic, when someone needs rent assistance, they can have someone right there just do it, fill out the forms that you comply with, and that's it. There's no sending this to, I don't know what you do, you have a telephone and talk to people. I just think you really made a bad choice, and I don't understand it at all. I mean, I wasn't consulted about this. Did you talk to any other commissioners about
No.
this before you presented this?
No.
Okay, well, what's a nonprofit supposed to do to get help for their clients? If somebody comes to Catholic Charities and said, I'm out of work, I got laid off, so I need help with my rent. What do they do?
Right, so as Melissa stated, she
Speak
will,
into the microphone.
as Melissa stated, she will work with those nonprofits to make sure that they get the word out to their clients to come to Douglas County through our portal to apply.
Why can't they just fill out a paper form saying, this is my name, this is my address, this is how much rent, and show, and then you have to have proof of what it is, and why do they have to go on the computer and a portal and get her involved in it? It's just more bureaucracy. Just keep it straight. I don't understand this. You're just making this so complicated. And why, I want to know, for starters, before I vote for this, what is this going to cost? I mean, Deloitte, I don't know what their hourly rate is, but it's probably much more than that attorney that I brought up. I want to know what's this going to cost. So before you go ahead with this, as much as I've been pushing to get this rental assistance going, I want to know what you're going to be paying Deloitte, okay? And get that to us. And the next time you do one of these agenda items, I've got one page. I wish the media could see it. It's just a page that's kind of blank and exact wording to be used for this agenda, CARES Act update. That's all I have. I looked at it last night and a couple nights ago. Couldn't figure out it was just going to be an update, and it's major. That needs to be on the computer, and you can't, it's not fair to us who have to make these decisions to have you blasted at us on Tuesday morning. So please do that and number the pages while you're at it so I can talk to you about what's going on. I am not in favor of what you're doing. You've just created an incredible bureaucracy, and a company that's incorporated in Delaware is going to get rich, another big corporation.
Commissioner Borgeson. We'll get to you next, Commissioner Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Boyle, maybe this will help, because I think this is easier. Because if a nonprofit has an individual who comes to them and knocks on their door and says, Mike, I need help with my rent. And they'll say, oh, here, let's go to the Douglas County portal and fill out the application. It's done. They're done.
Do you think they're going to do that?
Absolutely, because those are the individuals who already are working with those nonprofits in their communities. They know who they are.
Well, the way that it was explained certainly wasn't as clear as you just said, going to a computer right then and putting everything in.
Yeah, it's all going to be computer, all on the computer. It'll come through. It'll go through our department. The application will be vetted, all that stuff that the requirements will be checked off. It'll be a lot faster, and we can get this out, like Melissa said, in a couple of weeks.
And what's it going to cost?
What's it going to cost? The $10 million we're using for rental assistance.
No, not that. What are we going to be paying Deloitte? And
Oh,
what are we
that-
paying,
I
these
don't-
people per hour? We got to know. Find that out for us.
Well, we can find that out what they're paying per hour because, we would also have to,
We would
hire
have to
people,
hire.
and we would have to pay nonprofits would have
No,
to do
I'm
the
just saying,
same.
you have
So
to pay
I will
them.
ask
We don't
Deloitte
know.
what they would be
Patrick.
paying their employees.
Patrick, what are we paying Deloitte? That's what I want to know.
That
You
he's
got these-
finding that out.
So
I couldn't hear what you said.
if you want, Joe, do you want to come up and talk about the contract and what the compensation is?
What's do you know the hourly rate? You're paying people by the hour that are answering these questions?
It's my time, can I just say one more thing about using Deloitte? And Patrick alluded to it when he started his comments, is that and we sound like broken records, but at the end of the day, we are responsible to make sure that this money is spent correctly. And so us putting the safeguards in place and having the individuals that we're contracting with that are okaying our processes and helping us make sure that that's all, the i's are dotted, the t's are crossed, I think it's better for us in the end.
What's it gonna cost? What's it gonna cost?
It's gonna cost.
How we're gonna set this, and this has all been, as we've been having
Sorry,
discussion.
Mr. Lawrence, could you identify yourself?
Joe Lorenz, County Finance Director. The first thing that we had is to do this in the most expeditious, efficient manner, being compliant with the funds. And in the discussions we had, we looked and, we're not gonna reinvent the wheel. We looked and saw how everybody is doing it, and most people are doing it themselves. They're not going through the nonprofits. So then we said, okay, if we're going to do it ourselves, do we
Joe,
want?
can you hang on?
We better wait a minute until the commissioners you're talking to are ready to listen to you with the question they asked you.
Claire, settle down. Don't get so mad. Don't get mad. Just try to run the program.
You ready?
Yes, I am ready.
Okay.
Go ahead. Just tell me, what's the hourly rate of these people? It's at the total is $5 million, I guess.
No, that's the state contract.
Okay, so what are we paying these people that are calling or answering the phones around the country?
When Deloitte came back with their work orders, we agreed to $305,000. Now, when we're going to basically outsource the employees, Deloitte has like 3 call centers or areas throughout the country that are used for disaster relief and have people who are experienced in this application process in an automated sense.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is they're going to get a gauge of how big our program is going to be. They're going to get some of their people who work on this, and I do not have the exact hourly rate, but we will certainly get that to you as soon as possible.
Well, for my money, it's as soon as possible, is before anything is voted on, because everybody's in a big rush to approve this, and it sounds pretty good, but except that what are we going to be paying, and it's going to come out of the CARES money.
It is true. That's
going
going
to money from people that need it.
But, if we would have done it with Douglas County employees, they would have to pay them. If the nonprofits had to do it, they would have to pay them. These people, whoever does it, are going to have to get paid.
Yeah, and our Douglas County employees are already here.
But we'd have to hire new people. We're not equipped to do this at this point.
And at what rate? I want to be able to compare what it's going to cost to do it here versus Delaware.
Okay. Delaware.
Okay, please.
Okay.
Get us those figures. This is,
We will get you some figures, Commissioner Boyle.
as quickly as possible,
Yes,
because
sir.
it makes a difference.
And I was just informed that one of the nonprofits wants to speak in support of what our recommendation is when it gets time for the other people to speak.
Thank you. I can't see on the screen, but I believe Commissioner Kraft was waiting to speak. Okay. Now I don't hear Mark. All right.
And
Who else would like to speak?
say, Melissa, could I get a copy of that? Thank you.
County Clerk Danish, I have nothing to say. I was just trying to pull up our previous screen to see if there's anyone trying to get our attention. So.
Thank you. Is this on the rent assistance?
Yeah.
Very good. I'd like to keep the focus on that for a moment, and then we'll
Sure.
move on to other things.
Hi, Dr. Erin Feitstinger. I'm representing Together Omaha, 812 South 24th. And I know we're having mic problems, so everyone can hear me.
Kind of.
Okay,
The
great.
closer the better.
Got it. I had to pull it down, but that's been a lifelong problem, so it's fine. We didn't know what the process was going to be. Sitting here, I'm very pleasantly surprised by the process that General Assistance has developed. And I just wanted to clarify a few things. As a nonprofit who does this work for Commissioner Boyle, and I'm happy to answer any questions after this as well, we will be helping individuals. So like the way that it works right now is we have people in the community who are struggling. They know to call Together. They'll call us, they'll get a crisis engagement specialist. We'll go through what their needs are, what their income, walk through a sort of workflow, like what is your income, what kind of different funds you might qualify for to get you help, and if they qualify for this general assistance funds, then we would do that work for them and help fill out the paperwork. I know there's a concern about computers. We all have them, so we can go through that process with them. It's exactly what we do with SNAP right now, helping people get on SNAP. They call us, we fill out the paperwork with them, help them get all the documentation that they need, and then send that along to the food bank. In this case, we would do it with rental assistance to send it along to general assistance. And I also want to address the concern about our undocumented residents. As Melissa pointed out earlier, this pot of funds that you are allocating to rental assistance is going to free up money, the other funds that we use. So we help anybody in the community, regardless of their immigration status. That's not something that concerns us. What concerns us is that they're human beings who need help. So if they can't apply for this, I would hope, and Mr. Bloomingdale did point out that he hopes that we can get to a point where we don't have to ask about immigration status, but we will help no matter what. And I know that probably One World would do the exact same. So let's just, hopefully that clarifies some things for the commissioners, and I'm also happy to answer any additional questions that you might have. Before that, though, there were two things that I just wanted to point out. I've been up here before talking about the fact that this is going to be an entirely new group of people that are going to need assistance, people that have never touched the service system before, and we are still missing the 80 to 100% AMI for people who might need rental assistance. So this fund goes up to 80%. We are still missing the gap of 80 to 100% AMI of people who might need rental assistance. And the other thing is attaching or having a requirement that they're not receiving the $600 in unemployment insurance. We would also encourage that we disregard that. I know other jurisdictions have done it, but we are not in a position to judge who is more deserving or not deserving of this money. We don't know people's circumstances. All we know is that they need help. But otherwise, I think this is really wonderful, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Blue.
So how do you think this will work with you? I mean, you call her and say you need money, or how are you going to get this done?
Sure. So, and I'm not a case manager, but the way that the process works is, let's say you need help and you call us and you say, what? Aside from the normal. Let's say you need help with rent. You say, I need to pay rent. I'm this much short. We would say, okay, well, we'd ask you questions about your circumstances. What's your income? Do you have an eviction notice in hand? Other kinds of things that would help us sort out which pot of money we can pull from to help you. And we do this all the time. We did this before COVID. We're operating on a shoestring budget, trying to help as many people as we can. So we know how to work these processes. And we would just say, great, you qualify for this from the county, and we're going to walk you through the process. Do you have this, and this documentation? If you don't, can we get it for you? And help you through all those questions.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That helps me a lot, Ms. Feckinger. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thanks for this. If I understand you correctly, this could...
Jim?
Oh, can't hear you.
Okay, now. Your mic wasn't on.
Is it on?
It's on now.
Okay.
Y'all should try watching this from home. It's
If I understand you correctly, there could be different roles for the county's project covering certain people and the not-for-profit community covering the people that aren't covered by the counties. Is that right? So that we get as broad a spread of rent assistance as possible.
Yeah, so we do that every day. Every sort of funding stream that comes to us, we deal with federal money from HUD, we deal with money from the city, we deal with money from philanthropy, from all of these different things have different eligibility requirements attached to them, and the incredible team that we work with knows those funding streams and has a way to sort of sort out where people go, because we have all been in a situation where we've had to turn people away because they weren't eligible for something other than that. And we want to avoid that as much as possible. So,
Well,
just
that's great. I think that, covering the waterfront is definitely something that we want to see done, regardless of your status with
Right.
immigration or anybody else. It's rent assistance to people residing in Douglas County.
Yeah, and we know for sure that it's far more expensive to pull someone out of homelessness than it is to intervene right now and prevent them from becoming homeless. So the more that we can do that, the better. And all these other things that we're trying to do to help people get through this crisis, if we're trying to help people get jobs or help people get food, all of that will be unsustainable if we don't keep people in their housing. That's just the bottom line.
Right.
So
the role that you would play to get people the rent assistance through the CARES program that general assistance will be represented, would be kind of like a navigator role. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's what our crisis engagement and front door people do. Is people are in crisis, they come to us, they explain their crisis, and we figure out the best way that we can divert them from becoming homeless. That's our main goal.
And you'd help them with the application process for this?
Yes, absolutely. So if they didn't have access to a computer, they could call in. We could probably do it over the phone. This is what we do for a living, is help people navigate these various cumbersome systems. That's what we do, and we're well versed in it.
And that would be at no direct charge to the county, is that correct?
Yeah, we do that. If we were, as Mr. Bloomingdale pointed out, if we want to scale up any program, it's going to require staff. But no, we do this. Yeah, it'd be great if we had more money. We'd love to pay people more and hire more people, but no, we would not be charging you.
Claire?
Yeah, we're interested in that and concerned with the administrative costs because it takes away from the actual amount of the $10 million that we can get in people's pockets for rent assistance.
Our main concern would be the efficiency. So any way that we're doing it, that money needs to be turned around as quickly as possible because, as we keep saying, rent is due, and we need to help people out now.
That's great, and thanks for what you're doing. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Kraft.
Claire, can I speak?
Yes.
Yes. The 10 million, for the speaker, I have a question. I forgot your name. Is it Dr. Sherry?
Not close, but Dr. Feitstinger. That's all right.
Okay, thank you. The 10 million we have allocated is not nearly enough. OTOC suggested 35 million. Do you have a sense of what we really need?
So I have figures for the state right now and not ones for the county on hand, but I can follow up with you. I do know that 20% of total Nebraska renters in a U.S. Census survey said that they had absolutely no confidence that they would be able to pay their rent next month. And since Douglas County has the largest share of renters in the state, I would imagine that the cost is much higher than 10 million. But we are grateful for this. This is, the state is giving us 43 million out of 1.25 billion for housing, food, shelters, PPE, all this stuff, and you all are giving us 10 million of 166 million. So that's something. It's good.
Because I would like to have on the agenda in 2 weeks that we earmark an additional 25 million toward rent assistance, because I honestly feel that will not be enough.
Commissioner, I think that you're correct, and partly because this crisis is going to stay with us for a long time. It's not going to be solved by the time these funds need to be spent December 31st. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Done.
Okay.
This is Melissa Stewick. I was going to add something to that. One of our ideas was to kind of have different phases. So if the county board was going to administer more funds, where we would issue, go through the 10 million now, and then in, a month or two, go through another 10 million and continue that throughout the end of the year to make sure we've spent it, but also knowing that maybe somebody can afford their rent right now because they are getting the extra $600 a week unemployment, or they are getting their unemployment, but 3 months down the road they are going to be in need, and so we can have funds for that as well. So if the board is going to go ahead and pursue that, we are, have already anticipated that as well.
Thank you. Further conversation, Commissioner Borgeson.
I just want to make sure we have the first process down before we start talking about more. So let's get this going and make sure we get all the kinks out.
Indeed. Well, and I think it's impressive that we just voted a week ago to put $10 million into this fund, and yeah, you could have the documentation in time to get it out days ahead of time, but what you have turned around and brought us in a 1 week period, I think is great. Yeah. Commissioner Boyle.
Listening to Aaron make that presentation was inspirational, I guess, because you're doing the shortcut way to get money into people's hands, which whatever mode they use, computers or telephone. What I would like to see us do is consider, I know that this is a railroad heading down the path here, but I'd like us to consider an alternative to hiring Deloitte to do this. And what I would like to do is propose that we look at seriously when we find out what this is going to cost to have people in other cities accept these phone calls and so forth and do all this work, that we look at what it would, when we get that price, let's look at and see about how many unemployed residents, unemployed people who reside in Douglas County now and in the metro area, what it would cost to hire that number of people who could perform this job. We have a director who's fully competent and able to do this. Melissa is a standout. She's really a star in my book. She's helped me a great deal with people that I've called her about. And she had big shoes to fill, believe me, and she filled them. She fills them. Sure. So, and also I think, we could maybe even pay Together Incorporated or some of these other organizations, to do some of this work. But I think I'd like to see this staying here in town, largely because we have an awful lot of unemployed people who are able to do this work, and we could do it right here in town and help our economy, our own economy, and we do it kind of the Omaha way. And I do want to say that I do support Commissioner Kraft on extending this to $35 million. I know it's a little bit early, but boy, that's really a dollar amount we need. So can you please come up with an alternative about how many people we'd have to hire here to do this job, and who would be doing it? I suppose we'd even do nonprofits, and what it would cost versus our friends, the corporation. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
And when are they to report back with that, and then are
Well,
we to make the decision? Or, so we're talking weeks of delay here.
No, we're not delaying it. This has been delayed anyway by a long time. Why don't you, just figure out, get from Deloitte what they're thinking of paying, and then if they're going to hire 400 people, then we would figure out what we'd hire 400 people, what we pay them. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes,
It doesn't have to be nuclear science.
One of the good things about using Deloitte is they already have thousands of employees around the country that do this kind of work.
Yeah.
And so they wouldn't have to hire people and train them. They could just reassign them and get up and running pretty quickly, as opposed to us having to go out, do an applicate where people would come in, but we'd have to interview them, we would have to get them on board, we'd have to train them, because you can't just come in the door and start doing it. And so we'll do whatever the board wants to do, but if the board wants this to be done as quickly as possible, I think what we're recommending is much quicker than doing it the other way.
Quickly as possible is gone. We've been hanging on to this money for so long, and I've never been able to get an answer.
Are you
yet.
speaking for the whole board when you say quickly is gone?
Myself.
Okay.
For me.
I'm speaking for myself. I can speak. Do you want me to speak for you?
I agree.
No.
Claire thinks this is all beautiful. I don't. I think there are alternatives. We've got hundreds, if not thousands, of unemployed people here in Omaha that can do this work. And when you start talking about how we work with them, it's always this big pained program. We got to bring them in. We got to interview them. We got to train them. We got, it's just, but with Deloitte, it's bango. We're ready to roll. Okay. So let's compare the cost. Tell me what we're paying those people per hour all around the country, whatever it is, and what Deloitte gets paid for doing that, what their take is. And then let's take that money and take a look, what could we do if we hired unemployed people here in Omaha and put them to work? People have been laid off from various places. It could happen. It doesn't take it's a system that, we could get Erin to train them. It's simple. So in any event, and you could too, Melissa, she knows the ropes. So let's just look at alternatives. Don't dam this whole thing up like it's not gonna work. It might. And plus, we have the advantage of putting Omahans and Douglas County people to work. That's what I'm saying. And so can you get it to me? And as soon as you get the Deloitte figures, call me, we'll get together and we'll go through it and figure out what we can hire in Omaha, okay?
Well, if that is what the county board as a whole wants to do.
No,
then
that's what I want to do.
Well, I understand, but
I'd like
if
to
the
see an
board,
alternative.
Commissioner, I respect what you're saying, but if the board as a whole wants us to get this thing done as quickly as possible, we're going to do what the board as a whole wants us to do, because if I go with what each individual commissioner wants to do, then it's going to be, then we can forget the timeline.
It makes me think you're getting paid by Deloitte or something. What's the deal?
Because
Come
what
on,
I'm saying is
Patrick.
Deloitte has
Listen,
employees that
don't
that
tell me
already
that-
know how to do this.
Hey, listen, don't tell me as a commissioner I can't ask you for more information. That's just outrageous.
That's not what I'm saying, Commissioner.
Yes, you are. You're saying the board has to
What you're asking is for us to
May I
delay the
speak?
process.
May I speak out of respect to me? Okay? What I'm asking is a simple thing. You look, what is Deloitte going to charge? And then we can see how many people we could hire in Douglas County to do the same work. Now, you're throwing at me, well, unless the whole board says that, you can't do it. I am requesting that as a commissioner, and I have the right to do that, and you have a responsibility to respond to me. So it's not a big deal. If you want me to, you give me the figures and I'll figure it out if it's too much work for you. Come on.
Certainly.
What's the process to be? Who makes the decision then about, I mean, on one hand, we're saying, go, 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 this money's burning a hole in our pocket and people are broke, get it out. But hold off, we want to look at all the alternatives. Let's look at hiring our own people, training them. What is the directive from the board? Is it to move as quickly as possible or to explore every alternative that any commissioner comes up with to delay the process?
It's not complicated, Clara. You've made up your
Okay,
mind, but it's not.
what's the answer?
The answer is, if you get the figures today from them, then we can figure out, call me, I'll come down, we'll talk about how many people we could hire in Douglas County for the same amount of money. It is not nuclear science.
And then who makes the decision?
You make the county board makes the decision.
In 2 weeks?
Huh?
In 2 weeks?
Well, are you planning on doing this today?
We are authorizing them to do it, but you're asking for the process.
Are you talking about we're supposed to vote on this today?
No, no.
So the plan is to move forward with this even before the next county board meeting. What my intent was, as long as I see that there's a consensus here, we're going to move forward. Now, if the county board says we don't want to move forward, then we're not going to do
The
that.
county board is not saying that. The county board is going to adopt the expensive proposal that you've come up with. There's no doubt about that. But I want to know sometime, and if I have to do it myself, I don't care. I'll do it myself. But just get me the figures. Just get me the figures that Deloitte's going to charge themselves and what they're going to be paying these people per hour around the country. I just want to know those two things, what's the cost, and then I will do the figuring myself. Okay, I don't want to burden you with that. And the board is going to vote for this. If they could, they'd vote for it right now. But give me a chance to find the alternative, and I'm going to put some people from Omaha to work instead. I don't think that's too outrageous. So just, you get me the figures from Deloitte, and I'll do the other work, okay? I don't want to burden you.
Thank you. Anything else under rent assistance? Commissioner Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well,
I'm sorry, just real quick. Ben Salazar did submit something in writing so when you're done, I'll read what his comment was before we end.
well, I just want to make sure that we are moving forward. Additional information is all fine, whatever commissioners want to look at. But as of today, the directive was, and we voted last week, to move forward with this, for you all to come up with the process. You've provided us the process. I think we move forward. It's fine if commissioners want additional information, because it sounds like we're going to have additional issues or opportunities after this. But again, to get these dollars into paying people's rents, I think we move. And I'm fine with that.
Thank you.
And I would like to mirror what Marianne just said.
Thank you. Did you have something
Yes,
from?
so Ben Salazar had a comment. I'm going to read it. He said, "Hi, just a quick comment to rebut Ms. Borgeson's belief that it is very simple for our community to access rent assistance. I have been working with 2 people on the street," and it's in quotes, so I say on the street, in a nonprofit to spread information on assistance some of which is for rent. Most of our applicants do not have computers and have no knowledge of what assistance is out there. Thanks to our outreach workers, they are ultimately channeled through me and over to the right nonprofit. It is not as easy as some might think to reach every family in need in South Omaha. It is sad that for an issue this important to the Latino community, I do not see nor hear from one single Latino leader, and he has leader in quotes, speaking on this issue. My street level assistance, then he has street level assistance in quotes, comes from community folks who do not get paid to do this work, nor do I. I also frequently work with the publisher of a Spanish language weekly who does great work in both print and video, Facebook, Twitter, etc. End of message.
Thank you. Commissioner Borges.
Well, to defend myself here, Commissioner, thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't say it was easy for people to find rent assistance. What I said was we're making the process easier and for them to use the nonprofits that they're familiar with within their communities. And that could be a whole array of them.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm hoping that we've discussed rent assistance enough for one morning. I know I have. I would, Larry, if you want to comment, this would be on rent assistance.
And then I'm sorry, after Larry speaks, then we would, Rick Kubat would like to speak from MUD on behalf of MUD and OPPD on utility. Rick Kubat? Yes, so that would be next.
Yes. Once we are done with rent assistance, we can move on to utility assistance or whatever. So for the moment, we're focused on rent assistance. Does anybody else wish to address this group concerning rent assistance? If you want to speak, do it now. Okay, seeing none. Well, if you want to speak, please do.
You need my name and address again?
Yes.
Larry Storer, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I really like Mike's idea. We do have a lot of unemployed people here. And Omaha is it not a major communication center for the country? I remember way back when I was in sales, Northwestern Bell started the telemarketing center in Omaha with the communications network. And that expanded and expanded and expanded. We use the term customer service for people that do that kind of work on the telephones. People here in Omaha can do that. They can probably come in with a script and give you all people a script, give you 20 minutes worth of training, and then monitor your calls and correct you where you're wrong. Because this really is getting money and assistance to the people that absolutely need it, like Mr. Kavanaugh is saying. So why not use our unemployed people here to do that? There's a lot of them that have been fired or lost their job. They're on unemployment or maybe not. Now, my daughter has quite a bit of experience in customer service. I have had, and I've sat next to some very good telemarketers, and I've sat next to some Johnny Carson salesmen. It's not that hard. We're not looking for a profit motive here. So we don't need to spend money giving it to Google and all these places that are building those big buildings around here to pay their executives to do this. And we've got financial counselors here in Omaha. Why can't we have a little garden party here and get some advice from them and guidance, but also the nonprofit people? Not to pad their executive salaries, but to save the money instead of sending it to Delaware or somewhere else. For God's sakes, it does not take a rocket scientist to know that if you spend the money here, it benefits many more people than it would there. Thank you.
Luis?
Luis Jimenez, 30 306 Spur Street. I'm been watching the process, and I'm encouraged by some of the developments, the discussions on a portal, on where the application for rent assistance can go. I understand that there's a lot of local organizations and individuals who have experience as well that can do the work of vetting the application. So I'm just kind of like hearing both sides, or the back and forth that's going on. This is, I think this is missing the trusting, or I mean at least the discussion, trusting the local community and knowing the local community. There is a lot of nonprofit work that is eager to step up and help on this component to the CARES Act funding. What I was encouraged by was the information that I can find on the website. And I want to share one line here.
Luis, I don't mean to interrupt you, but for those on Zoom, could you please mute yourselves? Someone is tapping.
That was helping out. Can I show you guys this line here? There's a brief. I guess I can't. Here is a short description of last week, and that's useful to me. It says that you guys approved allocations. One is $10 million for rent assistance, which will be administered by a local qualified organization that will ensure that rent assistance meets CARES Act guidelines. So there, I had a different expectation. I understand the portal is helpful. I think that's what everybody's trying to work towards. And you asked the administrator to do this, and you got an administrative plan. Go with what you're working with. So I can see what Mr. Boyle is saying, and it's very important not to delay these things, but I think trusting who we have here locally is important. It's very important in a lot of things that we discuss. So one last thing I want to point out is throughout this work and this development is that the opportunity to have this experience and individuals here that are helping with the CARES Act allocations. Those are you've selected those individuals that experience, and that's Deloitte. And I think some other people are possibly missing out on this experience that is with responding to a natural disaster. A pandemic. And hopefully we're not going to have to rely on our processes on a more frequent basis in responding to disasters and pandemics. And I want to share that.
Thank you, Luis. I'm hoping that wraps up the discussion on rent assistance for today. It does not, however, complete the CARES presentations. One of the other areas that we will be looking at, and I hope giving consideration to down the road, will be utility assistance. And we have representatives of both OPPD and MUD present with us to discuss this possibility. I don't know if any of you guys remember this baby-faced guy here, Rick Kubat. He used to hang around here a lot.
He's aged.
Welcome back, Rick.
Hasn't been a graceful aging process for me.
Rick, make sure the mic's right here. There you go, thanks.
Rick Kubat, R-A-C-K-K-U-B-A-T, here today on behalf of the Metropolitan Utilities District of Omaha. Here today also is a representative from our fellow utility provider, the Omaha Public Power District. We're here today in light of your conversations on rental assistance. We kind of see utility assistance being associated with rental assistance for Douglas County residents impacted by COVID. Both OPPD and MUD plan on resuming disconnections over the next couple of months, next few weeks. In light of the pandemic, we both had a moratorium on shutoffs, and we told folks, especially with the water on MUD's side, we want people to be able to wash their hands. We didn't want to shut the water or the utilities off, and OPPD did the same as far as electricity goes. We share in your concerns about terminating life essential utilities as our customers struggle with the financial fallout attributable to this pandemic. We are seeking any possible solutions and alternatives to avoid disconnections. Disconnections are the last thing that either utility wants to do. Douglas County could help residents impacted by COVID with CARES Act assistance to maintain water services for hand washing, daily living, and sanitation, to help folks turn their lights on, flush their toilet, cook, and as winter approaches, heat their homes. We are hopeful that these basic needs will be at or near the front of the line with your CARES Act considerations. We've been working with our energy partners at the Omaha Public Power District, and we're going to recommend that this board consider using Dollar Energy Fund to administer utility assistance. Dollar Energy Fund right now already administers utility assistance for both MUD and OPPD. They are a 501c3 nonprofit. They have a system in place for utility assistance, albeit it's going to need to be adjusted so that we could provide the appropriate documentation to show that assistance is being provided for COVID related purposes. We're happy to work with Deloitte, Douglas County, or our general assistance, the local nonprofits, or anybody to make sure that the documentation and protocol meets what is required. Right now, Dollar Energy Fund, similar to what Aaron talked about earlier, already has partnerships with 21 local nonprofits. We brought that list with us today, and we'll share that with the board before we leave. They're already partnered with these local nonprofits. You can go to the local nonprofit, and they'll walk you through the steps necessary to apply via Dollar Energy Fund for both electricity, gas, and water. They also have the programming available to ensure that only Douglas County residents receive Douglas County funds. And then in light of several questions by the commissioners, the nice thing, if you were so inclined to go this route, is OPPD and MUD are going to pay for all administrative costs. So every dollar Douglas County were to allocate for utility assistance is going to be directly used for customers that need the help. So you're going to get 100% or dollar for dollar. Lastly, I just want to make clear to this board that both MUD and OPPD, like all the other political subdivisions in Douglas County, are going to be requesting assistance for our own internal COVID-related cost. We have with us today, again, I mentioned Seth Voiles from OPPD. Also with him is Britton Gable, who's on the call. We have the Chief Executive Officer from Dollar Energy Fund. His name is Chad Quinn. He is on the call. And from MUD, because as this board's familiar, I can always use extra help. I have Megan Murray and Stephanie Mueller with me. That said, happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thanks for this, Mr. Kubat. This is great. You know, we talked when we're getting rent assistance being followed by utility assistance, food assistance, healthcare, medical assistance. So you're right on point with where we would like to go, getting as much assistance as quickly as possible to COVID-impacted residents of Douglas County. Just for clarification, did you say that MUD and OPPD both will end the disconnect moratorium in the next 2 weeks?
Not necessarily the next 2 weeks, but right now the plan for OPPD, and I stress the word that it's planned, is we're looking at starting gas disconnections the very beginning of August, and water in early September, as early as September 1st. And I believe that OPPD is looking at, I'll defer to Mr. Gable on OPPD's plans, if Britton can chime in on that.
Okay, so that first date was July 29th, is that correct?
Gas early August, and water September 1st.
Good morning, this is Britton Gable. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is Britton Gable, Senior Product Specialist from Omaha Public Power District, to answer the question that Mr. Kubat had raised regarding OPPD's plan to resume disconnect notices and disconnections. So OPPD, starting July 1st, will start issuing disconnect notices to customers, the formal disconnect notice via mail. With that being said, the plan is to resume field collection activities and disconnect notices to align with our office reopening. We're currently working on the official date of that. That will likely occur the third week in July, when those field collection activities will resume.
What does
is
that
the
mean,
tentative
field
timeframe.
correction activities? What does that mean?
So that means that we will go out and disconnect and ask for customers to go ahead and make a payment on their account, or try to work with them to get assistance.
And those are first firm dates by OPPD for disconnecting people's utilities?
So the customers will start getting disconnect notices. So those are going to go into production effective out in the mail July 1st. The resumption of field collection activities, that's tentative. You know, we are monitoring the COVID situation at this time. But with that being said, we're tentatively going to resume field collection activities the third week in July.
So tomorrow, you're going to send disconnect notices. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, starting with our billing cycles in July.
And then you look to disconnect people the end of July.
Correct.
Mr. Kubat, thanks for this. And it's something that offers us a process for rapid implementation, and based on what OPPD is saying, we need rapid implementation to avoid unnecessary and draconian disconnects. Is that better? Okay. So thanks for this. This is a good roadmap. Do you have a dollar amount in mind that would be like the $10 million that we approved for rent assistance startup that would get us a startup on this?
What we did was we looked at our customers that are currently eligible for shutoffs, and we had at least with the Metropolitan Utilities District, we had our CFO look at just an estimation, and as we discussed, it's more art than science in far as making those determinations. But our preliminary thought was that we would probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of just over $3 million of lost revenue as it relates to COVID, folks not being able to pay their MUD bill related to COVID.
Okay. So this would cover looking back, COVID onset was like the middle of March to now and forward, or just that back period?
What we asked him to do, knowing that the CARES Act allocations were available, I believe the start date's March 1st through December 30th, we asked him to look at that time frame with the information that he had in front of him as of yesterday.
Okay, and that's both utilities?
And so what we did, and we submitted a letter to the Douglas County Board requesting a collective amount of $4 million or $2 million per utility. We believe there's going to be more need in all likelihood out there, but this was a starting point for us.
Great. Thank you very much. And thanks for working with us on this. We hope that we can get it done before anybody gets their utilities disconnected. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Rick. And so on those COVID-related expenses, there are some individuals that their utilities are tied to their rent as well. Are you able to either identify those, or could you possibly work with, or the energy folks work with our rental assistance program to make sure that, we're not paying the rent and utilities and then utilities over here? So you don't have to answer that today. I'm just saying, as we move forward, those are some of the things we have to look at.
For sure, and we've had those conversations, and I believe what you're talking about is those cases where folks rent and utilities are tied together with their particular landlord. We're more than happy and want to work with Douglas County General Assistance to work through that issue. To be honest, we don't have a good answer to that specific issue today, but we want to work with you and partner with you and work towards a solution on that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Morgan.
I'm going to say something, but there it goes. I was going to say something similar to what you just asked, Mary Ann, and that is important because it is included much of the time in their rent, especially in apartments and that kind of thing. At least maybe MUD, electric may not be, but sometimes it is. The other question I had is, if someone's getting unemployment, and in many cases, and I've heard this from some of the restaurant owners and others, they're actually getting more money, don't want to come back while they're still getting unemployment. You'll go through a process of interviewing the people. Will you do that internally, or are you working with a nonprofit to help you on that? Rick?
So that's what we're using Dollar Energy for, and similar to the rental program that was discussed earlier, the way that I envision it is there's going to be a web-based application, and then within that web-based application, there's going to be a series of questions. Are you having difficulty paying your utilities due to a COVID-related experience? And then behind that, there's going to be questions that that drive out the necessary information and necessary documentation so that we can make the appropriate showing as far as the federal funds are concerned, that it's an appropriate allocated purpose.
Good. And that's not going to be easy to go through that process. And, I think we have a lot of confidence in the utility districts doing a good job of that. And I think we want to be supportive of what you're doing, in my opinion. And hopefully our people would work closely with you, whether it's Patrick or Joe Lorenz, so that we keep getting updates of how it's going and that kind of thing with you. So I thank you for coming today.
Appreciate those comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle.
Thank you. Well, I'm really very, very impressed with your presentation, Rick. You did a great job and really explained what's going on so well. And what hits me, and I don't know if it hits other commissioners, but we have a local utility that has dealt with people not being able to pay their bills. And they also apparently are able to separate the utilities from the rent when they are trying to get their money. I'm really astounded that we don't just start talking to MUD and OPPD about doing our rental assistance, because they're going to be on the phone talking to people who can't pay for gas and water and electricity. Well, surely those are the same people that can't make their rent. So it seems to me like, they have this a web-based application that we could add another couple of things to it to make sure that they get the information that we need. And I've made notes while he was talking, and it just seems like you're talking to the people that can't pay utilities. Why not incorporate the question about rent? If you can do that. I mean, you have the staff, apparently, you have the telephones to do all this. You're local, you've dealt with, you're dealing with people who don't have money. I mean, to me, it's a natural. Is it? Am I wrong?
I appreciate that, Commissioner Boyle, and I do want to temper the board's expectations, just like General Assistance is trying to work through this.
Right.
And again, we have Dollar Energy Fund on the phone. We're going to get to work quickly and as fast as possible. But we need to build it out right now, and we're going to be concentrating on building it out for gas and water.
Right.
As far as tying into the General Assistance Program, we're more than happy to engage in those conversations. To be blunt, right now, I look at those as being two different categories.
Sure they are.
One for rental and housing and one for utilities. It just so happens that we're fortunate enough that with the Dollar Energy Fund, we have a nonprofit 501c3 that this is what they've done in the past and are currently doing.
Yeah.
But they can chime in if they would like. They are in 14 states and providing services for 42 utilities.
Wow.
What they do is utility work. I believe rental and housing assistance would be outside of the scope of what they're what they're good at.
Okay, so let me ask a question. Is it that organization that's going to be calling people? It's not MUD and OPPD?
So the way that it would work is similar to your discussions with the General Assistance Program. Folks would have access to go to one of the 21 nonprofits that local nonprofits that Dollar Energy is already partnered with. Folks can go to their nonprofit. The nonprofit can help them assist them. They can also go to a web-based portal with Dollar Energy Fund and directly apply through Dollar Energy Fund for assistance. And then we're working on it right now, but I believe OPPD and MUD are going to have some resources available for our customers to also assist them with utility assistance.
Okay, well, that we were told, I think we were told that we need Deloitte to account for all these things. And how can we give you, $4 million and not have Deloitte involved in that to account? I mean, who's going to account and protect us from the feds demanding the money back? But that's what it's all about.
Well, to that degree, we want to work with Deloitte or whoever your administrator is for your CARES Act allocation to make sure that we have an appropriate paper trail to get Douglas County and Deloitte and your administrator everything that they need so that everything's in order so that whatever funds are allocated can't be second guessed on the back end.
Okay, well, I think we need to work on that quite a bit because what we just went through here with Patrick was that Deloitte should do this totally. So I just don't know how you fit into that, to tell you the truth.
The good news, as I mentioned earlier, Commissioner Boyle, is whatever funds you were to allocate for utility assistance, as mentioned earlier, 100% of those dollars are going to go to Douglas County residents for utility assistance. Right. So you don't need to engage in the administrative cost associated with what we're recommending is set up for utility assistance programming.
The problem that I have is we were told only Deloitte can do this, and now you're presenting something that doesn't involve Deloitte. So that I understand. I have full faith in you. You've done this for years, but that's what I'd like to see is for you to do this and account and have locally do the other by an account as well. I just don't see all this stuff with Deloitte having to occur. But anyway, the two, what you're presenting and what was presented is really diametrically opposed. But, because you don't have the oversight of Deloitte in there that the other operation does. So I will have to figure that out.
Thank you. Did you wish to comment, Seth?
Yeah, I was going to answer that question.
Fine, fine. Please identify yourself.
Seth Voiles, 1513 North 183rd Street. And so you can, when it comes to CARES Act funding, this is a whole new thing for everybody, because we haven't seen this before and how this much money has been given out. This is a whole new field that we're working in. So Treasury's been putting out guidance frequently, and it's mainly coming out of frequently asked questions. Last week they did one on the 24th that says here, and it's on page 8, and you guys can see it, CRF FAQs. May fund payments be provided to nonprofits for distribution to individuals in need of financial assistance, such as rent relief. But it covers all of it. And it says, yes, nonprofits may be used to distribute assistance. Regardless of how the assistance is structured, the financial assistance provided would have to be related to COVID-19. So it just depends on how you want to set it up, and that's how it really goes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The point I'm making is that we were just told we have to use the Deloitte, and we don't have that oversight in yours. So I mean, I don't know which is which.
Please talk into your microphone.
I thought I was. But anyway, I'm surprised you can't hear me. But anyway, here's what we've been talking about, Mark, is that Deloitte was the only way to go earlier. And now we've got MUD and OPPD, which isn't going to use Deloitte in the same way that we were told we had to. So I'm just trying to reconcile what we're doing. I like the MUD OPPD approach much better. It's local, and it keeps the spending here as much as possible. And it has a track record. They know how to deal with people who are in financial trouble. It makes sense for us to, I think, explore working with them instead of this Deloitte operation. That's my thought, and that's what I'd like Patrick to do, and I'll work with him.
And what Mr. Kubat said too is that we want to work with Patrick and GSA and everyone else too to make sure that we're doing this, Deloitte, whoever it is, to make sure going forward that it's done right. Just that when it comes down to it, the administrative costs, the application costs, our two utilities are going to cover that. So whatever money you give is going to go directly to the residents of Douglas County.
Well, personally, I have a lot of faith in both of your operations. You have a very good reputation in the community and in this part of the country for delivering the services at a good price. And so I think most consumers really trust you a lot, and I'm one of them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion about utilities assistance.
Thank you.
We do not have this on the agenda. I wasn't particularly planning on taking action today. We would have to declare an emergency to do so. I think what I'm planning on is probably in 2 weeks from today at our next meeting, having it on the agenda.
Would you consider declaring an emergency? I mean, aren't we we're going to give them some money. I really think we ought to make this expedited. I'll make a motion that we declare an emergency.
On this one, I'm amenable to that.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we declare an emergency for the purposes of giving MUD and OPPD the money they need.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So this motion is simply to declare an emergency.
Right.
And that will allow us, if it passes, the opportunity to consider action. Commissioner Borgeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want clarification, because I don't think, I'm okay with making an emergency and setting aside the dollars for utility assistance, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're giving it to MUD and OPPD, because they just said they use Dollar Energy. So that's different than giving it to those two utility companies. So all I'm saying is that if we want to make an emergency resolution to say we're setting aside $5 million for utilities, period, and then staff will work with you all for the process.
That's great. Thank you for clarifying that.
Well, and that's really a good point, because as Rick pointed out in his presentation, they will be back. I mean, they're getting hit on two fronts, the utilities. And what we're looking at today is from the customer's perspective.
Yeah.
What we will be asked to look at a little bit down the road is from the utilities expenses perspective, some of the expenses they have incurred, and it will be up to this board to decide.
Good.
And
Commissioner Morgan.
And I want to be sure this is on. Didn't I hear Rick say, though, that they're going to talk to Deloitte, or where our staff's going to put them together so that we can be certain that we're meeting those guidelines?
That's
Am
what
I
I was gonna
correct,
say.
Patrick?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm very hopeful and I want to say confident, since Dollar Energy is so unique in that they are the ones that do this and the only ones that do this. My hope is that it's going to comply with the guidelines where we can go directly to one nonprofit rather than doing applications. We'll get that answer hopefully today. But yeah, I'm fine. Go ahead and allocate it. And if there is some kind of serious bump in the road, I'll contact the commissioners today if I get the answer today and let you know there's a serious bump in the road. I'm very hopeful that we'll just be able to go forward.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Then the motion before us is to declare an emergency. Could we please vote on that?
I vote yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. At this point, then, I would consider a motion.
Just have one quick question about the CARES Act, if that's okay.
Sure.
I mean, it pertains to it. I just want to know, with the city, if they submitted a list that we're working on and then going to have that here to look at, and are people making recommendations?
Where are we at, Joe? They're still, the city is revising their list, last I heard, looking at guidelines a little bit differently.
Well, I know that we're getting calls, and people attended a function last week where the mayor said, we're not helping them. And I just want to be sure we're getting the list from them so that we can see where it is. And I know other commissioners have had the calls about that we're not paying attention to the city, and I want to be sure where they are.
Yeah, Commissioner Morgan, you know, we've worked with the state and we've come to a basic understanding that we will split the city's eligible expenses 50-50 between us and the state. And so I think the direction has been given to people at the city there's a page outline that the governor issued. It shows what the qualifying expenses are. And I think that those directions have been relayed to the city, and it's my understanding that they have those guidelines, they understand them, and right now they are compiling their costs that would seem to qualify under those guidelines. And then they will submit that to us, and the state and us, in conjunction with Deloitte, will review those costs, and if they're qualifying cost, you know, since we've already allocated $25 million within our CARES Act spending, that we would take those qualifying costs against that $25 million as a eligible reimbursement to the city.
Okay.
Another factor, though, that should be thrown in is that the state is different than us, at least so far, in that they are requiring all of the applicants first to go through FEMA to see what assistance they can get that direction, and then the state will step in for the remainder that FEMA does not cover. So there is a little difference in how we in the state are approaching this. Omaha's figures, actually, last I saw, they seem to be kind of growing. I mean, I don't know where they're going to end up, and it is my intent to try to cover 100% of their qualified expenses. That's where I've been since day one, and I believe the board is there, provided we agree with what
They're qualifying, right?
What's actually qualified.
So at some point, you'll be coming back to us with some of those things, and this meets the guidelines, et cetera.
Right.
and
When we
we'll be
receive
going-
their submission, we'll evaluate it.
And we'll do that here.
Well, we'll do it, I think we'll do
I
it
mean,
first
we-
in conjunction with the state and Deloitte, and then based on what we're coming out with, we would come back here to the commissioners, of course, before any disbursements could be made, and take you through it and show you the amount and what we view as qualifying.
That's perfect. And I want to thank our staff, because I know this has been a lot of challenging work and trying to keep it all together. So we appreciate the extra effort you're putting forth on this.
Thank you. I do have a motion on the floor, and I'm looking for a second.
We have a motion for $5 million.
Can we get the mics on, please?
We have a motion from Commissioner Borgeson for $4 million.
I would second that, and I would ask that we vote on that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Further questions or comments to the motion?
Yes. I'm sorry, Commissioner Borgeson, to make you repeat it again, but what was the motion, please?
My motion is to set aside $4 million for utility assistance
Okay, thank you.
Of the CARES fund.
of the CARES fund.
Okay.
Okay, everybody clear then on the vote? Okay, then I would ask for the vote, please.
I vote yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. As far as I'm concerned, I think we're done with CARES for today, I hope. Okay, all of this is, every week, it will be on the agenda with Joe Lorenz's name. Every time we meet, we will have ongoing updates and discussions of what's going on with this. Item 6, public hearings. We have 3 public hearings to conduct here on behalf of Environmental Services. The first is a zoning text amendment to all portions of the county's zoning regulations. Zoning text amendment request by Environmental Services and Doug Cook. This is a public hearing. Doug, is Doug on? Oh, he was earlier.
He was going to join, or Kent.
How about Kent?
Kent?
Okay, this is Doug. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good morning, Doug.
Okay, good morning. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, my apologies for that. So, good morning, Commissioners. Doug Cook, your Douglas County Planner from 15335 West Maple Road, the Douglas Room. So our current zoning regulations were adopted in 2007. Minor changes have been made over the years, but this document-wide revision is the first one since 2007. Oh, second here. Yeah. You're gonna share. Hold on. Okay. You gotta hit the share button down the bottom. There you go. Okay, so. Oh, I'm still not. Okay, so the basis for these changes of our
You're perceived as boring, Doug. Most of our Zoom people dropped off here for you.
I take that as a compliment. Okay, so the basis for the change is our 2018 comprehensive plan. And as you know, the comp plan is our visionary document, our plan for our future. The zoning regulation is the toolbox with the specific nuts and bolts to follow that vision. The staff proposed changes to the zoning regs have been presented to the Planning Commission over a series of meetings since late last year. At their most recent June meeting, the Planning Commission has recommended unanimous approval of these changes. I'd like to go through some of the changes here. So since 2007, new terms and definitions have come into existence. Tiny houses, agritourism, and Airbnb. Those terms were nowhere around in 2007. They have been added to the regulations. With regard to our zoning districts, staff is proposing to consolidate our 3 commercial districts into 1 and the 2 industrial districts into 1. The very recent small cell wireless trend is an entirely new section, and our regulations are based on Omaha's recently adopted small cell regulations. Where possible, pictures have been added to help visualize what the text is saying. And yes, I will freely admit that after 40 years as a planner, the zoning regulations can be not the most exciting and riveting reading. Individual lot erosion controls will be required, incorporated as part of the building permit process. Such controls include silt fences and straw bales. 2 highway corridor overlay districts are proposed. These are along the gateway entrances to the county from the west, and they are West Center Road or Highway 92 and Pawnee Road or Highway 36. This designation carries with it standards for landscaping, building design, setbacks, modes of transportation, and I would say not just cars, but bikes and feet, signage, and of course, conservation design. FEMA, state, and county minimum standards require new construction in the floodplain must have its lowest floor 1 foot above the base flood elevation. Staff is proposing new construction have its lowest floor 2 feet above the base flood elevation. The base flood elevation, or BFE, is the height of the water during the 100-year storm. Regarding landscaping and screening standards, the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum and the County Extension Office are used for resources for appropriate plantings. And throughout this process, we have added pictures. Similar to our floodplain regulations, if a non-conforming structure is damaged over 50% of its pre-damage condition, current regulations must be followed for future construction. As to how soon after an application is recommended for denial by the Planning Commission, an applicant can refile, we are proposing a 180-day waiting period. With regard to notifications, current notification distance for the county for items such as rezones, special use permits, and platting is 1 mile, or 5,280 feet, which is shown in red. And this property highlighted on your screen, that is the Nelson Farm property, which has a special use that was granted about a year ago, and they have the agritourism business. And you may recall there was extensive public comment on that. Staff is proposing to decrease that notification to 1/4 mile, or 1,320 feet, which in this case is the green circle. As a comparison, City of Omaha generally notifies 300 feet out from the application site, and our neighbor to the north, Washington County, goes out 200 feet from the application site. In conclusion, staff is not requesting a vote today. We solicit your questions and the public's questions and comments, and then we'll ask the board to continue this hearing to July 14th, at which time we will ask for adoption of these text amendments. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you for that explanation, Doug. Commissioner Borgerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you say one more time, we're moving it from what to 500 feet?
1 mile to 1/4 mile.
1 mile to 1/4 mile?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Doug, thank you, Mr. Chair. Doug, can you send this information to us? I don't have it on my computer, and I don't have any copy. Can you send it either by computer or mail, whatever works for you?
This presentation or like the whole zoning document?
Well, I think what you're expecting us to vote on is what I'm asking about. And
okay.
So I suppose, and I did have a question already. I don't think I understood this article, the one that's on the screen. Did you say that if somebody, maybe I understood you, someone applies and is denied, there's a 180-day wait before they can apply again. Is that correct, or didn't hear that right?
What they're proposing.
No, you did hear it right. If they could not submit an identical application unless there's that cooling off period of 180 days. However, if they make substantive changes, then they would not be bound by that 180
Okay,
day.
all right, okay. All right, that's fine. Thank you very much.
I would also say we are technically in a public hearing for the zoning text amendments. We have been discussing as well changes to the comp plan, and which is a second public hearing. And we're going to continue all of these for 2 weeks anyway. We're not planning any action today. We're just beginning the public hearing, and then we will continue them in 2 weeks and consider action at that point. So I guess at that, I will declare that we're also opening the public hearing on the comprehensive plan amendments related to stormwater.
Okay, Mr. Chair, and Kent is going to make that presentation.
Okay, fine. All right.
Those two items.
Okay. Jan Kent? Wow. You guys got quite a show going on out there.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kent Holm, Environmental Services Director. And yes, I will pick up from where Doug left off here with the zoning rights piece. And I will talk about first the comprehensive plan amendments. First, from an historical standpoint, there were a number of stormwater policies that were in a separate document, the Douglas Washington County policies, and a number of those policies were all adopted back in 2009. Since then, we've had a change in our stormwater permit that is issued from the state of Nebraska under the auspices of the Clean Water Act. That National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Phase 2 permit has some very specific requirements regarding quantitative standards and so on. And there are some things also that in those existing stormwater policies are simply now not relevant, and are also, there's just been some evolution over time from 2009 to today. And we want to make sure that those policy documents are up to date, that they are consistent with other elements of our comprehensive plan, and that they are also consistent with what we're being asked to do with our stormwater permit. So in looking at all this, it seemed to make sense to us to be able to take those policies and move them from a separate document and put them into the comprehensive plan, because they are by nature policies, and the policy document is the comprehensive plan. So that was the thinking behind that and the intent behind that. And so the policies that were in that standalone document are now being proposed to go into Chapter 4 of the comprehensive plan. And those policies really get down to 4 main categories. One being peak flow reduction, talking about reducing the amount of water that's running off immediately after a storm. Looking at erosion sediment control. Doug talked a little bit about the piece that's in the zoning regulations that when we're issuing building permits, we want to make sure that those are done in a responsible way, so that we don't have a lot of erosion sediment running off of sites and damaging other people's property, getting on roads, being tracked out, getting in the storm sewers, and ending up in creeks and rivers and so on. The no net increase in runoff really just is the basic policy, is that we are looking to not see any increase in runoff, and that was a core policy before, and we continue that. And then floodplain management, Doug talked a little bit about that as well. A lot of that is really in the context of the floodplain overlay, talking about the FEMA regulations and the base flood elevation and so on. So those are the things, those are the main policies that are being proposed. Under peak flow, there's 3 standards: a water quality, channel protection, and flood control standard. Those help us meet the quantitative requirement that exists in our stormwater permit. The erosion sediment control piece of it, talking about the construction site controls. Doug mentioned silt fences and so on. This is just an example of construction sites, and we want to be able to keep the impacts from the construction site on the construction site and not impact the adjacent properties and so on. The no date increase in runoff. As you well know, recall, a big component of the Douglas, Washington County stormwater policies was the requirement that we use low impact development. The comprehensive plan, when it was first adopted in 2006, had that as a key element. That continues today. The updated comprehensive plan that you approved in 2018 in September very much stresses that we're using low impact development. We're not using regional detention. We're using low impact development techniques to try to mimic natural hydrology, to really do the things that we need to do to keep runoff from ever getting started in the first place. Flood management, again, Doug talked about that, the base flood elevation. We feel given the very recent flooding events of 2019 last year, that it makes sense to take that base flood elevation and have it as a requirement that we need to be 2 feet above the base flood elevation as opposed to just the 1 foot. We feel like that will be a benefit long-term to property owners and to help mitigate and prevent any damage, or excuse me, mitigate more of the potential damage that would occur. So with that, I'm going to move on, unless there's some specific questions on the comp plan piece of this, move on to the stormwater management regulation.
All right, before you do, then let me say that we will now also concurrently open the public hearing for adoption of revisions to the stormwater management regulation. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. The stormwater management regulation is the specific regulation that helps address those quantitative and qualitative requirements in our stormwater permit. As we've done with the zoning regulations, there are a number of definitions that we've updated to reflect current conditions, and we've added several new definitions simply because, as pointed out with a lot of things, the devil's in the details, and when you have good definitions, generally you have good regulations. So we've done that in several different areas. From an enforcement standpoint, this is something that we actually put in place prior to. This is more of an administrative thing, but it's referenced in the stormwater management regulation. And we've taken enforcement, and instead of having it kind of piecemealed all through documents, there's a standard enforcement response plan, which is required by the stormwater permit, and that just helps to define how we're going to deal with enforcement. And I'll just indicate that from an enforcement standpoint, the first thing we always look for is voluntary compliance. We will look at, let's say, a construction site that doesn't have silt fences or something like that. We will go out and work directly with the property owner and say, look, this is what you need to do. These are the things that we based the building permit off of, and you said you were going to do. You need to do those. And we look for voluntary compliance. If we don't get voluntary compliance, then it's just kind of a progression up in enforcement from an enforcement standpoint. So at some point, yes, there potentially is a fine. Ultimately, if we're not getting compliance, it would be turning it over to the state Department of Environment and Energy and so on. But hopefully, the vast majority never even get to that point. From a stormwater design manual specification standpoint, one of the requirements of the permit is that we just need to identify, what are you using for design? And there are a lot of good, especially when it comes to low impact development, and some of the techniques which are required by our comprehensive plan and our regulations that we can use, or a developer's engineer, for example, can use the Omaha Regional Stormwater Design Manual and or the Iowa Stormwater Management Manual. Both of those have have some good technical information on how things like rain gardens, bioretention cells, permeable paving, things like that can and should be installed. And those are manuals that are commonly used today by the engineering community and the development community. From a development project requirement standpoint, again, this is a requirement of the stormwater permit, our phase 2 stormwater permit. And here we are just better defining the requirements, having checklists available so that it makes more sense from a process standpoint. When a developer wants to come in and do a development, here are the requirements that help you meet your stormwater management plan requirements. And then it also provides that same template for us to review them, and just as a better overall transparent way to move projects forward. And then from a maintenance standpoint, clarifying in the regulation, the property owners do need to maintain certain stormwater improvements, and that's a big component of low impact development and green infrastructure. And then just having maintenance agreement provisions that identify here's what you're responsible for to help maintain the integrity of some of those stormwater improvements, which again help us implement things from a low impact development standpoint. And with that, those are the proposed changes. As Doug indicated, we felt very strongly that we didn't want to have any consideration and adoption of these today. There's a lot of information here, and we also wanted to, because this is the first time that you've seen a lot of these things firsthand, that we wanted the board to be able to ask questions. If you had specific concerns about some things, then we could come back and we'll have some of those things for you. As Doug will have the presentation available for you, and all of the documents will be available in whatever form you'd like. So with that, that's the end of our presentation, and happy to entertain any questions. Both Doug and I are here.
Thank you. This is actually 3 different public hearings, all kind of related, that we're holding at the same time. So this is the opportunity for anybody from the public to share their thoughts. Commissioner Boyle.
Yes, first of all, an excellent presentation, both of you. You always do a great job. And I really appreciate the materials because they're very readable. So that's a big deal with me. Excuse me. I'm curious on when you're doing the flood elevation, there was a picture of a home that looked like the foundation and the whole thing had been washed out. When you go in and do those things with the homeowners, what is the effect? I mean, are they going to lose some property or tear something down, or what kind of an outcome do you usually have when you have to enforce that?
Doug, do you want to take that?
Yes, I'll be glad to.
Doug will address that.
Commissioner Boyle, hopefully I'm correct in thinking that you're referring to those series of 3 pictures that look like they were mobile homes right along the bank of the river.
Right.
Is that the visual? Okay. So those were all visited by us, myself and our stormwater assistant, to do a flood damage assessment as required by FEMA.
Uh-huh.
And 2 of those, because they're in the floodway and were damaged over 50%, cannot be rebuilt in that location.
Okay.
Another one was in the 100-year flood fringe, and even though it also was over 50%, it could be rebuilt, but it would have to be elevated.
So, I mean, the people, they can't live in these places anyway, so they're really pretty damaged, and you help them get their house back in shape some way. I mean, this elevation helps, or is there any cost involved to the homeowner? I mean, I suppose they have to tear down the house, that's a cost, but that's not you necessarily.
Right, those would all have to be torn down.
Okay.
And moved, and under the current regs, any new construction would have to be a foot above the BFE, but we're thinking we want to be progressive, ahead of the game here, and go 2 feet.
That's a good idea. I've got a question just kind of in general, because we've been out there, it's been a long time. Mr. Borgerson and I went out there. And
we met in Valley, and I'm really curious, what is the amount of territory that you have now with the city's aggressive annexation policies? Do you have, is it mostly, well, I don't know, I guess I ask you, where is most of the territory you're doing this for?
We have 55 square miles of just what we call rural Douglas County.
Okay,
Okay, and I'll be glad to provide you a map.
okay, that'd be fine, that'd be great. And then I was curious too, on the votes that are taken there, 8-0. Do you have a vacancy, or you always had eight people, what board members?
We do have a vacancy.
You have a vacancy. Okay, that's good. Okay, well, we'll look into that. I want to tell you, thank you very much. Your messages, while they're a little complicated for me anyway, I do appreciate the way you present them. Really a good job, Doug. Thank you very much. And that goes to the boss too. Thank you.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yeah, just a quick question regarding zoning. The city has this big transit-oriented development zoning proposal coming up. Does that impact us at all? Are we involved in that at all?
Commissioner Ken Holm, Environmental Services Director. I would say that does not necessarily impact us directly. You will see in the comprehensive plan language that you've already adopted, we have some transit-oriented development language there. Some of the areas in our jurisdiction that can be served by municipal services, such as the interceptor sewer, MUD water, and so on, those are anticipated to develop at higher densities. And obviously, one of the things with transit-oriented development is that you need to have higher densities available to be able to make those services pencil out. So we have language in the comprehensive plan that helps direct that. Does it require transit-oriented development? No, but we want to make sure that we are not an impediment to that ultimately, because the more public transit we have that can get to the areas which are going to be in Western Douglas County, that's a potential conduit to get workers there from their locations, or they may be in some other areas of Omaha, but being able to get them to where we potentially have jobs. So yes, there are some ties to that. As we had an emphasis on local food production and things, you mentioned Doug mentioned the Nelson Farm application from last year, the agritourism thing. If we facilitate ways to be able to get people to and from those locations, and public transit is one thing, then we want to try to be comprehensive in our look at that. We want to be able to have language there that doesn't prevent proper densities that could support transit-oriented development, for example.
So at this time,
convoluted answer. Hopefully that got kind of to your question.
yeah, it does. Thank you. And at this time, the transit-oriented development is tied closely to the Metro Transit's Orbit project, but that doesn't enter into our zoning area at all. Is that right?
That's correct. The Orbit thing really, at this point, only goes to West Roads and points east.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments during these public hearings? I think Douglas County has always been pretty progressive in terms of our low impact development requirements and everything, and pushing houses up one more foot out of the floodplain may be a little cumbersome to somebody building a house. In some cases that's a hassle, but when you look at the number of 100 and 500 year floods we've had in the last few years, it seemed like a good move. I think that is forward looking, and I applaud what you were doing. Any other public comments during these public hearings? If not, we will continue the public hearings until Tuesday, July 14th, 2 weeks from today. And after we close the public hearing, we can consider action at that time. Thank you, Doug and Kent.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. And I would just add that I do appreciate your leadership in approving the comprehensive plan update. The original in 2006 was very progressive and has set the stage for doing a lot of really positive things in the community and the metro area. And then also, just wanted to follow up, commissioners, any of you that if you have any specific questions, as we will provide all of the information to you in PDF forms and so on. But if you have any questions between now and July 14th, when the item is back on the agenda, please let Doug or I know so that we can follow up and we can have the appropriate information for you. So just let us know. And thank you for the opportunity to present.
And I would like to thank you for an excellent presentation.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. Yes, it was. All right. I'm not aware of any legislative issues. I hope not. So next on the agenda, and I apologize that this took so long to get to it, but we're finally here, a resolution to create a Douglas County Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Committee. Commissioner Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, this is supposed to be co-sponsored by myself and Commissioner Rogers. But as we have experienced the civil unrest, not only here in the community, but we've seen it across the country, and then we heard from some of our staff as recent as last week about some action items that we can take to begin to address some of the items in which they've talked about. And so by creating this committee, I think that we are really listening to what they're saying, and we're trying to come up with action items where we can address some of these. So I put before you this resolution that creates this committee so that we can have our high-ranking officials take a look at what our hiring, what our promotion, and what our training policies and procedures are, and whether or not they are in line with best practices to address diversity, inclusion, and equity. I also would like this committee to be kind of a catalyst, not just the end-all be-all, but that each department would be able to then take what they feel are issues within their departments and bring back to the committee to try to do things better here in Douglas County. The third thing is to work with the community to either partner with or have a special event for us celebrating our diversity and inclusion and equity throughout the year or during special times, but that we bring in and partner with community organizations that are already doing this. So again, it's a start. It is by no means the end-all be-all, but I think that we have to understand, not only as policymakers, but our elected officials and department heads have to understand, what do our hiring practices mean? What training do we provide? What are our promotion policies and procedures? And what could we bring forth to make it better, and again, be in line with best practices out there? So again, this is just a start. I would ask that we approve this and get together and figure out those items. Oh, the other one is, I think I did say training. I think we need to look at what our diversity training is and see how often it's provided, and again, whether it aligns with best practices of that type of a training. And so with that, I would ask for a motion to approve.
So move.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
I think that's a great idea. I like it.
All right.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you. If there is no further discussion, then could we please vote?
Chair, I'd like to make a comment after the vote.
All right.
Motion by Commissioner Boyle to approve, second by Commissioner Rogers. Motion passes. Commissioner Kraft, are you still here?
Yeah. Yes.
Did you vote yes?
I vote yes.
Okay, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle.
I was going to say, I hope that, Commissioner Borgeson, this is really a great idea. I like it a lot. It'll really help us all focus. And I hope that it will include equal pay, because frequently we find that things happen. And so I am pleased that both of you are there. You'll watch it like a hawk, so that's good. That'll be great. The other thing I want to mention is that I am going to be bringing a resolution to the county board to declare that Douglas County will not discriminate against gays, lesbians, and so forth, and transgendered people, really mimicking what the city of Omaha did some time ago, and putting us out there that we are not discriminating against any of those folks because of their lifestyle. That's I feel very strongly about that. So I'll be bringing that up and for discussion, and then we can vote a week after, whenever it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I am not aware of any other business to be conducted in open session today. We do have need of an executive session. We have 2 pieces of litigation and 1 of negotiation.
Motion to go into executive session.
We have a motion and a second to go into executive session for litigation and negotiations. Could we please vote?
I vote yes.
And as usual, I'll announce when we come out of executive session, the only business we will consider conducting is the adjournment. Sure. Oh, it'll be really quick.
Motion passes 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ron, I have a,
Today's the last day to file, so we're able to get this in. Meeting adjourned at 12:54 p.m.